I like the monkey bars and I like the knots and crosses. I like the monkey bars. I like the clocks. We are having lots of fun at this playground. Bye! Bye!
I'm Haikal Raji from A1 Bakery. We've been in Brunswick since 1992. We specialise in Lebanese bread and pastries. We've also introduced a range of Lebanese dishes to our menu. And we've also got a wide range of Lebanese groceries. We like Brunswick because it's very multicultural. Me and my siblings have been here a majority of our lives. This is our second home and we like to treat our customers as our own family. We're very proud in what we do and how we do it.
G'day guys, my name's Chris. I'm here from Moreland City Council just to show you a bit about this tractor and how it works and what we do and how we get around and cut all the grass on the ovals. How's that? Is that better? You want to play tag with the tractor? Your teachers will find it. Thank you very much.
Goodbye! He's going through the bump. There he goes, through the gate.
In 2009, Council began research and consultation to identify the key challenges in sport for women and girls within Moreland.
The review identified several issues.
There was a serious lack of female competition and teams.
Only 8% of participants using council sports grounds were female.
To address this inequality, Council introduced a policy to encourage clubs to be more inclusive of women, juniors, people with a disability and people from culturally diverse communities, or risk losing an allocation of a ground to a club that is being inclusive.
Female participation has now increased by 161% in Moreland.
West Coburg Football Club is proud to align with Moreland's policy.
This year we successfully launched the club's first ever under-12 girls footy team.
We're changing our club.
We're changing our culture.
I'm changing the game.
So I'm Claire Johnston and I'm an accredited cricket bat maker and the first female in the world. I learnt how to make cricket bats from Ian Cullen. There's a lot of bats out there for men and I felt that there was an opportunity there to actually work with women to make better bats and to actually make them for their style. So recently I was commissioned to make 5 cricket bats for the Pascoe Vale Headfield Cricket Club for their under-13s girls cricket team. And yeah, to see their faces when they were given the cricket bats was just brilliant. So what I'd really love to be able to do is to keep working with my local community, the local cricket clubs, particularly the women, and yeah, work to make great cricket bats.
My name is Michael Tortoni. I'm the founder of Melbourne's legendary jazz club, Bennett's Lane. I've recently moved to the very cool Brunswick. The Jazz Lab here on Leslie Street, Brunswick is Melbourne's new home of jazz. In my old club, you might have seen Prince for a late night set, or the Wynton Marsalis Band, or even the Harry Connick Jr. Trio. My new club will also host stars of contemporary music, starting with the Bill Frisell Trio for the Melbourne International Jazz Festival, as well as local stars. So drop in for some great music and a drink at the Jazz Lab.
My name's Leslie. I have been with Moreland Family Daycare as an educator for over 36 years, I think. Family Daycare is a wonderful organisation. We look after children in our own home, they blend in with the family, and it's fantastic.
I love Family Daycare.
I can choose my own hours, very flexible. I've made wonderful friendships with lots of the families. I'm now looking after children of the children I used to care for. The children just growing and developing is a wonderful, wonderful experience for me every day. I'd recommend Family Daycare to anybody and everybody.
And I acknowledge them as the traditional owners. I'd also like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and elders from other communities who might be with us tonight. I acknowledge that currently many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have made Moreland home, and in doing so have contributed to the positive, rich diversity of this municipality. Members of the gallery, please note that this council meeting is being recorded and web streamed live to council's website and Facebook. This recording will also be available as video on demand. Gallery attendees are advised that they will be recorded during the meeting. Councillors, just a reminder, in line of the adopted Councillor Code of Conduct principles, as outlined in the Councillor Code of Conduct, councillors should ensure that they conduct themselves in this meeting with integrity, impartially exercising their responsibilities in the interests of the local community and not to improperly seek to confer or advantage any person. This behaviour will support principles of leadership of good governance that secures public confidence in the office of councillor. I'd like to introduce my fellow councillors who are this evening. Starting from my right, we've got Councillor Sue Bolton, Councillor Anna Olivia Carley-Hannon, Councillor Helen Davidson, Councillor Jess Dorney, the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Natalie Abood, and we have Councillor Alia Farnley, Councillor Dale Martin, Councillor Mark Riley, good evening, Councillor Lambros Tapanos, and Councillor Oscar Yildiz. Officers in attendance tonight, to my immediate left, and we have the Chief Executive Officer, Narina Di Lorenzo, and then starting from the corner there, we have Grant Thorne, who's the Director of City Infrastructure, Arden Joseph, the Director of Social Development, Kirsten Costa, the Director of Planning and Economic Development. And from the inside here, we have the Acting Director of Corporate Services, Liz Rowland. We have Surrey Cullen, who's the Unit Manager of Governance. We have Olivia Wright, who's the Manager of Property and Governance. And in the corner, we have Sue Vitrovic, who's Acting Executive Manager of Organisational Development. Councillors, I don't think I need to call for an apologies, because looking around the table, we're all here tonight. Do we have a disclosure of interests or conflicts of interest tonight? There being none, we'll move on to the confirmation of the minutes. Councillors, could I have, please have a motion for the adoption of the minutes held on both the 11th of April and the 24th of April 2018. Moved by Councillor Yildiz. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Dorney. Would you like to speak to it, either mover or seconder? Any discussion? Being no discussion, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. Petitions, councillors. In the agenda, we have one petition. We have petition number 618, Unleashed Dogs along Primula and Adelaide Boulevards in Gowan Brae. Do I have a mover for this petition to be received?
I'm happy to move.
Councillor Yildiz as the mover and Councillor Farnley as the seconder. Either mover or seconder like to speak to it? Any other contributions? Being none, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. Are there any petitions to be tabled by councillors tonight? No? Do we have any petitions from the residents in front of us? Yes, would you like to come forward?
Hi councillors, I've got, yet again, more public toilets at Coburg shops. I'll read it out again.
Have the name?
The public toilets in Coburg are totally inadequate.
Sorry, just before you say, it's
Yes.
Corinne, isn't it?
Karina.
And your surname, Corinne?
I don't like to give out my surname.
Is that acceptable?
Privacy,
No,
it's
fine, go.
The public toilets in Coburg are totally inadequate. People with medical problems, people with small children, pregnant women. There aren't enough toilets at the Coburg shops, leading to pressure on the toilets in the Coburg library. Some people have stopped going to Coburg shops because of the lack of toilets. The cleaning and the maintenance of the Exeter public toilets is infrequent and totally inadequate. The rapid increase in the number of flats and units in the area means that more people are visiting the Coburg shops without any increase in the toilet facilities, and many women don't like sharing public toilets with men for obvious reasons of hygiene. We call on the Moreland Council to increase the number of public toilets in Coburg and improve the frequency of cleaning. We have 66 new signatures.
Thank you very much. Would you like to bring that forward, please, Corinne? And thank you for your... Karina. I'm sorry, Karina. Thank you, Karina. All right, could I have a mover to accept that petition tonight? Moved by Councillor Bolton. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Yildiz. Would you like to speak to a Councillor Bolton? That's fine. Councillor Yildiz. Okay, so I'll put that to vote that we accept that petition. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. Are there any other petitions for tonight? Being no further petitions, we'll move on to question time. This is an opportunity of 30 minutes for citizens of Moreland to raise questions with councillors. I'd like to outline the process. Please note that if your question relates to a matter that's on the officer reports or the notice of motion, this is your time to raise your question. Questions can also be submitted prior to the meeting. A maximum of 2 questions per person is allowed, or a maximum of 3 questions on any one subject. Councillors will then proceed to the next subject, returning to the previous subject if time allows. If your question cannot be answered, it will be taken on notice and responded to between now and the next council meeting. If a response to your question is given at tonight's meeting, there will be no further response. However, council will action any commitments made in answering the question. We have 30 minutes and I want to make sure we get through as many questions as possible. So I ask that we don't enter into debate during this time, and you'll be given time to inform council of the context of the question, but I ask that you get to your question as quickly as possible. And according to that clock, which is a bit slow, but we'll go by that, we're starting at 7:04. Okay. Our first question tonight is from John Eglart.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. My first question is on the Moreland Street renewal, and it's in regard to, is there going to be facility made for improving the canopy cover as this place really heats up during the summer extreme heat days.
Okay.
And associated with that, I'm visiting that shopping centre 5-6 times a week. I'd like to be involved in placement of the bicycle parking hoops in that area, or at least Moreland Bug to be involved in that.
Okay.
And the final issue about that is there's concern over whether parking is going to be reduced. So parking's already strained, so has there been any research done on the parking availability during a normal working day, including Moreland Street and the parking lots behind the shops on either side?
Okay, thank you for that, John. We'll wait for the answer there. Any councillors would you like to go to? We'll go to the Director of Economic Development and Planning, Kirsten Costa. Thank you.
Straight through the Mayor. Is that working?
Yeah.
Yep, okay, sorry, it doesn't sound like it. In relation to the public works and trees, certainly every opportunity for trees will be explored as part of the streetscape plans that will be developed. It's been feedback that's been gathered from the community about what it would like to see in this plan, that trees be part of that, so that will be explored. A key component that Council is considering is an enlarged civic space, and that would be an opportune place for large calibre trees there. That's part of the final scope. In terms of the car parking and the impacts of that, certainly with the transport team, we are looking at what we call accumulation and duration surveys, so how long cars are parked in the centre and what the frequency of turnover is, just to give us a feel for how the cars will be impacted by things like the civic space that will be an extended curb. So that will all be taken into account. And then the final one that you had was in terms of the placement of bicycle loops, and certainly we can consult with the bug. And the plans will be made available to the community before they're finalised, and everyone can provide input that way too. The bicycle loops will be shown in that as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, that's
And my
another question now on a different matter. Yep.
Very quickly, on the Metropolitan Transport Forum. So I note that only 2 forums are being proposed for Pascoe Vale and Brunswick electorate, but they're all of Fawkner and part of Hatfield and Glenroy belong to Broadmeadows.
That's
so
correct.
I'd like to see what you're doing to address the concerns over transport for the residents of those areas.
Okay, I'll take that as a comment, but also a question that may be the mover of the notice of motion. Would you like to answer that one?
Thank you. Thanks, John. Yeah, thanks for your suggestions about this. It hasn't gone off my radar in considering this, and aware that I haven't actually addressed this in terms of my notice of motion tonight to try and get a forum happening in the Pascoe Vale seat. But I'm really happy to explore that with Hume and the residents in that area to get transport issues on the agenda ahead of the state election. So just for people to realise that we're running these with the Metropolitan Transport Forum, which is a combined council effort to address transport issues, because many of the transport issues that affect us are actually not things that we actually have levers over, so it's an opportunity for us to advocate. And there is a proposal we do one in Brunswick, but I'm actually suggesting we do one in Pascoe Vale. However, I must say many of the issues that are going to come up at both of those will actually affect Broadmeadows as well, in terms of we need to get more buses and more links to our tram lines and our train lines so that people don't have to rely on their cars to get there and then find that the car parks are too full. Those kinds of things will be there. And the other part of the strategy is that closer to the election, the Metropolitan Transport Forum will also be running a Bus Matters campaign to actually have quite a concerted effort to improve bus access for Melburnians, excuse me, mainly because half of Melbourne, broader Melbourne, do not have access to trains and trams. They have to rely on buses or cars and other vehicles. So it's really important that we do something about that. So I'm more than happy to talk to you about that and try and work on how we can get a forum happening in Broadmeadows as well, as far as Moreland having part of its jurisdiction in that state seat as well.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Thank you, John. Next question is from Joe Pieri.
Good evening, Joe Perry, Fawkner Residents Association. I want to start by giving the proposed quality design scorecard for the proposed fast track development program a score of 0. I stood here at the February council meeting and outlined why the current development process is appalling for the manner at which it disempowers residents. Development of the scale that's being imposed on Moreland and us as residents only exists because the end-to-end process is so one-sided in favour of the developers and disempowers residents and our ability to object. As residents, we don't even have a council help desk to assist us to mount an objection when a development comes into our streets. And to say the services of council's planning department are equally accessible to residents and developers fails to acknowledge and appreciate that as mums and dads, as working people in general, we don't know what questions to ask and how the process works. In that same address, I referenced my objection to the proposed fast-track process and said if the development projects are so good for the suburbs of Moreland, if they're so great with respect to architectural and environmental merit, if they're going to enrich the quality of life of current and future residents, then why do they need to be imposed and fast-tracked? This process will diminish the rights of residents by further eroding the ability of residents to object. So my question this evening is, why is fast-tracking so important, and why is the voice of the community and our input not being sought?
Okay, thank you very much. And I'll go to Councillor Martin, who's also the chair of the Urban Planning Committee.
Thanks for your question, Joe. And I'd like to start out by stating that I do plan on moving a different motion tonight, not the one that's listed in the report. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you were talking just then. The reason why we need some sort of scorecard, some sort of enhanced process is because the quality of planning at the moment is pretty poor up north. We're seeing a lot of really bad developments, and what we're trying to do as councillors is to try and actually improve the quality of the development that's happening right across the city. Now, one of the things that you'll also notice later on in my alternative motion, there is no mention of a fast track process. That is something that is being reviewed, and so what is going to happen tonight is I will be moving that a scorecard goes back to the Urban Environment Committee for further discussion. So I won't be moving anything tonight that references a fast track process, but I do acknowledge that we do need to do things in this city to improve the quality of planning, and I hope that maybe we can discuss the scorecard and the process in a little bit more detail outside of this forum.
Thank you very much, Councillor. We move on to Barbara Bolton, please.
Good evening, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak. In the master plan, we're wondering what council provides for pensioners in their 70s, 80s and 90s who are no longer active in swimming, playing tennis, running or jogging, because many of us can't do that. Now, we're dancers and we love to dance. The physical health is something that's proven. The social contact, the self-esteem, the fact that we continue to go out is what we're involved in. So we're seeking help that council would assist in subsidising our dance, which is open to the public, and we've had Councillor John Kavanagh and his wife came along, Oscar, and also Mark have come along to see us in action. So we'd love for the rest of you to come along and see the dance too at some stage.
Good on you, Barbara.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I think the Deputy Mayor wants to answer your question. No, probably you.
Hello, Barbara. Thank you very much for coming, and I believe that I mentioned this to you on the phone during the week as well, but and Olivia and I, Councillor Carly Hannon and I went earlier in the week to meet with a woman from the community and one of the officers from council with the aim to establishing an older person's working group. And since that happened, everything that has come by me seems to be related loosely or closely to the fact that there is an ageing population in Moreland, including your endeavours to secure the scenario with the hall that you currently have. But also, it was made very clear to me that there's a very big difference between seniors who might do aerobics over at the gym or something like that, and much older people. And Moreland is, lucky to be able to have people over 80 and 90 years old in the city as well. So I'm really glad that you've brought this question to us, and I can say that within the next, maybe by August, we should have a group of people together, and as I mentioned, I'll forward on the expressions of interest to you to pass on to your group, but we're looking to try and make contact with older people in the community to find out exactly what, past wonky footpaths, what actually can be done to support people ageing in the city of Moreland. So, thank you.
Good. And regarding your request, Barbara, that will be dealt with, and we'll try and move it up in the meeting so you don't have to wait too long. Thank you so much. Michael Hamill-Green.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening, Michael.
As a Moreland resident and ratepayer, why is Moreland Council paying my rates and those of other Moreland ratepayers into a bank that, firstly, has reportedly loaned over $21 billion to fossil fuel industries since 2007, thereby contributing to climate change risks to our children's future and that of the whole planet? This is from the database maintained by Market Forces, who follow the investments of all the banks. Secondly, this bank has reportedly invested $1,232 million in nuclear weapon-related industries, including Honeywell, since 2014, something that is illegal under international law governing the weapons of mass destruction, and is prohibited under the 2017 Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons that I believe you considered at your last council meeting. By providing that investment in nuclear weapon industries is thereby contributing to an ever-present threat of nuclear conflagration that would create an unthinkable humanitarian and global catastrophe, even in a limited nuclear war. So that's drawn from the ICANN report, Don't Bank on the Bomb. It's only just been updated this year. Thirdly, has been charged by corporate regulator ASIC for rate rigging. That's in the ABC News on the 6th of November last year, and the court case is continuing as we speak. Fourthly, has incurred $493,000 of penalties already imposed by ASIC for breaching consumer protections. That's The Guardian, 29th of April of this year. So the bank I'm referring to is Westpac, to which Moreland City Council, as I understand it, is currently transferring from its previous banking arrangement with the Commonwealth Bank. And I personally find it utterly unconscionable that the Moreland Council should continue to be banking my rates with yet another banking organisation that has been charged by ASIC with rate rigging and breaching consumer protections and would appear to be contributing to global threats to our future, such as global warming and nuclear weapons. The argument that Westpac might offer services required by the Council that other banks do not offer is unfounded. My own conversations with the CEO of Bank Australia indicates that she believes she can offer equivalent services to those four big banks. So I'd conclude by saying Council, I believe, should seek immediate release from any recently signed contract and transfer as soon as possible to some other bank that is not going to destroy our futures either locally or globally.
Okay, I'm going to go to the Chief Executive Officer. I think I'll go to the Chief. I'll let you go after the Chief Executive Officer.
Just through the Mayor, so I'll just provide some factual information and leave the rest to you, Councillor Bolton. So your question is to do with why we're going with this specific bank. We called tenders last year. We received 3 tenders. We advertised far and wide. We also made sure there was contact with a broad range of banks. It is for our transaction services. So it's a specific set of services, and so that the people who responded were able to provide what we were asking for. And of the 3, we selected the tender that met all of our different criteria in the best way. Notably, this one in particular was the lowest investment in fossil fuels. It was actually the lowest out of the 3 that we received. There was no tender from any of the banks that you've actually named. So if those banks want to participate, they also need to tender.
Okay, and I'll go to Councillor now.
Yes, thanks for the question. In 2015, during the time of the last council actually passed a fossil fuel divestment strategy, and that was after 12 months or 18 months of work of various reports and investigations. Now, I've got a motion in general business later on to call for a report to review that strategy and further steps the council's taking around that strategy, because certainly my belief was that a decision would come back to council for a vote before the contract will be issued again to a bank, potentially a fossil fuel bank. At the time of the adoption of the strategy, it was told to councillors that the non-fossil fuel banks didn't offer the full range of services, but my feeling was that at the end, the expiration of the contract with Commonwealth Bank, that we needed to look at that again to see if maybe some of those banks did offer the full range of services that council requires. That was in the time of the last council, so I think there is a need for the new council or the current council to actually review the steps Moreland's taking towards fossil fuel divestment.
Right,
thank you for those explanations.
Yeah. Just to clarify though, the tender was under the CEO's delegation duties, and so therefore that was conducted correctly under delegation duties. But if your point is, thank you. All right, thank you, Michael. Annalee?
Good evening, Mayor, councillors. This is in relation to a resolution the council passed in April about the D Division Museum. I'm just wondering whether the Minister for Planning has been written to and whether you've had any response from him regarding that. I lodged a petition with over 1,400 signatures with the office over a month ago. I've not heard anything. And next question after that is, should there be no response, what would council intend doing to promote the museum, even if the state government doesn't come to the party, as it were?
No worries.
Sorry, can we just clarify where those 1,400 signatures went to? Sorry.
Did they go to the planner, to us?
To the minister.
To the minister.
In the formal office, not his.
No. But I think you're concerned
about
it came to us.
Distinguishing whether
they came to us or came to the mayor. I've received an email response from the minister about, you remember I requested a meeting, right, saying basically in essence that after a lot of consideration, the minister has decided not to meet with me. Okay. I've got that from his executive assistant. I haven't received anything more formal than that at this point. First of all, I got a response saying that there was consideration about meeting, and then I got a response on the 2nd of May saying thank you for your patience while the Mayor's request for a meeting with the Minister was under consideration, and basically not prepared to meet on this issue with me. Now, I'm not sure if that's with other members, for example, the Pentridge Group, etc., but he's not prepared to meet with me anyway. Regarding other aspects, I haven't heard anything else other than that at this point. If anyone else? No. I'm sorry, that's all. The only.
Well, then
yes.
The next question was, what does the council intend to do to promote the museum?
Anyone would like to answer that? Yeah. At this point, we don't have a resolution to do anything at this point regarding the museum. Except the resolution was to write to the Minister, which we've done. We've asked him to gift it, which we've done. At this point, we're drawing blanks as far as that goes. Anyone else want to? Yep. Councillor Bolton.
I think that's correct, what the Mayor has mentioned, but I think now the next thing is for us to have a discussion in Council. I mean, there's nothing on the agenda tonight, but to have a discussion in Council about what else we can do to further the push for a museum in D Division. I think we've got to have that discussion.
Thank you very much.
I think we shouldn't leave it just here.
Okay, I've got 2 doctors from Moreland West Medical Centre.
Good evening, Mayor,
Good evening, how are
councillors.
you?
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak tonight.
Yeah.
We just had a couple of questions, but first of all, I'd like to say I'm Arati Kuteras from Moreland West Medical Centre. We have a planning permit application awaiting approval.
Yeah.
We were notified that it has been rejected by the Traffic Management Department, and we would be notified by mail of this decision. We have not received any formal notification from Council at this time. We have since been notified by Deputy Mayor Natalie Abu that our planning permit has been recalled by the Urban Planning Committee for review. Now, our question is, when we last came to a committee meeting in 2016, Council advised both Moreland West Medical Centre and the residents of the community that the traffic flow and parking in the area would be reviewed. Has a traffic and parking review been completed? Were any issues identified? If so, what was identified and what action has been taken?
Thank you very much. And I think the Deputy Mayor is happy to answer some of it.
Thank you very much for coming in this evening and presenting your question. Regarding the application, you weren't notified by mail because the application was put on hold because Councillor Martin and I have called it into the Urban Planning Committee because we believe it needs to come through the chamber. Regarding the traffic concerns in your neighbourhood, yes, I have been handed this, which is DCI 4/7. So February 17, a report did come back to this current council, letting us know that there were some issues and that the council resolved to continue monitoring traffic and parking conditions in the area, install additional signage to highlight turn bans on Melville Road at Bakers Parade, undertake footpath repairs at locations within the study area that are damaged, and inform Victoria Police of illegal vehicle movements and request enforcement. And I've also heard today that more monitoring, we're getting an update on this. So this work was done, it did happen, and we're just going to find out what monitoring has been done on that stuff since that work was done in February 2017. And your application will come through the chamber to the Urban Planning Committee for consideration.
Thank you so much indeed, and thank you for your attendance tonight. Mary Said.
Hi, good evening, everyone. What I would like to ask is, what is the minimum and maximum of setbacks in the situation of building one-story building, townhouses, or extension to the existing? Is it same to all the above? In regards to the overshadowing, are there any specific time slots of when to take photos for such purpose? If the overshadowing is over the extent that it is acceptable by the council, what actions are taken by the council to rectify and minimize the overshadowing? Now, what is the council responsibility if it chose otherwise in a delimitation report?
Okay, thank you, Mary, for the question. I'll go to the Director because they're very specific planning questions, and thank you for the point which you've asked.
Thank you, through the Mayor. Hi, Mary. In relation to overshadowing, the tests for that are within the RES code, specified in all planning schemes. The particular provision does require that at least 75% or 40 square metres with a minimum dimension of 3 metres, whichever is the lesser area on your property, of secluded private open space is available for a minimum of 5 hours of sunlight between 9 and 3 on the 22nd of September. Now, that is an awful mouthful, so I can give you this in writing separately if you'd like.
Yes,
if the existing sunlight to that secluded private open space is less than the requirements of the standard, the amount of sunlight should not be further reduced. So that's the critical thing really for you, that last part of that, because one of the major tests that was considered with the application adjoining your property was what is existing overshadowing and is any of the proposal increasing that overshadowing. And those were the critical tests that were made around the decision to approve that development adjoining your property. So I'm happy to take that away further and talk to you separately. That's the fundamentals of overshadowing.
But I know in overall, are there any specific time slots when to take photos to prove, in relation to the overshadowing?
Yet the 22nd of September is the critical date, and we do shadowing assessments at that time.
Yeah, at the equinox.
But what is the existing? That's what I would like to know now. What is the existing of the time slots when you need to do the photos for the overshadowing? The existing. That's what I would like to know.
Between 9 and 3.
3 on the day.
9 and 3.
Between 9 and 3.
Yeah.
On the equinox. Thank you, Mary. We're going to move on to Michael Gill of Coburg. No, take your time, mate. Thank you for making the effort.
Everything's an effort.
Yeah.
I appreciate the opportunity, Mayor and councillors. My question was around something that affects myself and my family and my neighbours in the Coburg area. We live in a rat run. And I assume everybody knows what I'm talking about when I talk about a rat run. I live on the Great Northern Highway, which is High Street, Coburg. I didn't know when I bought the property, but Vincent Street and Bell Street and High Street is a rat run, I believe, It takes away from our enjoyment of life, but certainly mine, my family's, my neighbours. And unfortunately, this thing is the leftover from me being hit by a car in a hit and run incident in January this year. And that is in High Street, and High Street, it's a little street off Bell Street, and the car was knew the rat run. It was travelling quickly through the surrounding side streets, came down my street, left into Bell Street and right into Vincent Street, which forms the southern part of the Great Northern Highway, if you like.
Can I ask you, Michael, how long have you been there, and is it getting worse?
No, I'm on the recovery.
No, sorry, as in the rat run itself. Sorry, no, I am concerned about the foot as well. I can assure you.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
Look, we've been there for coming up 9 years, and it's definitely gotten worse.
Right.
There's no doubt about that.
And is your foot getting better?
Thanks for the question, Mayor. Yes, it is. It's on the improve.
I'm pleased to hear that.
So my question, which was outlined there, is what is Council doing about the understanding of these rat runs and the traffic control within those areas? And also, I guess, to add to that, is the nature of the interaction between the side streets and the roads and streets that are probably run and overseen by Vic Roads.
Vic Roads, that's right. So a relationship between council roads and Vic Roads, Arterial Road. Okay, thank you for the very good question.
Thanks.
Now, the officer who's in charge of that area is the Director of City Infrastructure. That includes transport management. So.
Through the Mayor, thank you for your question, Michael, and again, hope your leg is better soon. There's a number of things Council have done and are doing, I suppose, across the city in road safety. In the current Moreland Integrated Transport Strategy, for example, is an objective to lower the speed limit across the municipality, which improves road safety in the streets. And we're progressively doing that across the city down to 40 kilometres per hour. There are other areas, and our Hay Street, which is just to the north of High Street there. We did a large piece of work last year in the safety along Hay Street. We haven't done anything in particular in High Street about road safety off the top of my head. We have done some other works there with trees and things in recent times.
Have you done some counting and speeds there? Yeah, very recently.
Yeah. So if we've had the traffic count there, and I haven't been able to determine that since receiving your question, but we do counts across the city on a regular basis, and we also often do those in response to complaints, etc. from the community. And I do recall your CRS coming through, and the counter is probably a result of that interaction. I can say we're currently developing a new integrated transport strategy, which includes a number of objectives about, that'll come to the June meeting for then go out for public consultation of further measures to try and improve safety across the municipality, which we'll see in a month or so's time. So I won't go into the detail of that, but as a council, we're concerned about the congestion, the speed, the safety across the municipality. We're looking at all sorts of measures to improve that for everyone, and in particular neighbourhoods as well.
I'll just make one more statement.
You may, Michael.
That in our vicinity, the area that you were talking about there, council seem to be proactive with a 40-kilometre-an-hour speed limit and some speed humps and the like. Unfortunately, this still happened from a speeding vehicle, and we can put our best foot forward. But I really believe that there needs to be more concerted effort from the council with regard to these problem areas to avoid this sort of thing or something worse.
Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you for the manner in which you've asked the question, and wish you well. You can make a quick comment, yes?
I just wanted to add that what is coming to us in June is actually the draft of the Moreland Integrated Transport Strategy, and residents are welcome to, it will then go out for submission. So I'd encourage you to make a submission to the draft.
Yep.
Thank you, mate.
Thanks.
Now, we've just hit half an hour, and I've got one further question, councillors. So I could have a motion to hear that question. Moved by Councillor Bolton, seconded by Councillor Davidson. Can I put that to the vote? All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. Karina.
I have two questions.
Okay.
There's only 8.
That's right.
Okay. Okay. After 4 years of sustained community pressure and hundreds of petition signatures, in June of last year, Council finally voted to build 3 new public toilets in central Coburg to replace the existing and widely disliked XLUs, which I will point out for all their bad qualities were still used in excess of council benchmarks. In December of last year, 6 months later, council staff wrote to residents and traders, this is the letter that I've just provided, to notify them of the commencement of building works. The timetable for the new toilet block was scheduled to commence in March of this year and expected to be completed in June of this year. Nothing much seems to have happened, and it's May. Today I went past the designated area and they were taking a soil test. So, here's my first question. Given the fact that council has a surplus of millions of dollars, and given the fact that council can move very fast and build something fast when you want to, who decided that it was fair or appropriate to take an entire year to get on with these works that are so necessary for public amenity and safety and hygiene? Are you actually on track to finish by June?
Okay.
As it seems like you're 2 months behind. Is anything else being done to resolve and address this issue?
Okay.
Is my second question, which leads on.
So it's that's
I have another
one.
question.
Yeah.
That's one.
Okay. Well, and this one's also about the toilet.
Yes, it is.
Okay. So I'll let you go and then we'll answer them together.
Okay, that sounds like a good idea. I note that my friend Sean recently wrote to councillors via email, drawing their attention to the fact that of the 2 XLU toilets currently servicing the whole of central Coburg as the only public toilets, only one was working. It had been out of action for at least a week, possibly 2 weeks, and council must have been aware that there was a problem as there was an out of order sign on it. So my question is, regarding that particular incident, as Sean couldn't make it tonight, why were the many thousands of residents, visitors and traders to central Coburg subjected to a situation where you only have one functioning public toilet meant to service everybody? How's this fair? And please don't say that they had other options, because the traders are really sick of being harassed by people wanting to use their loos. And so
Okay. Thank you, Karina. All right. I'll go to the Director. Thank you, Director of City Infrastructure.
Through the Mayor, thank you for the questions. On the first question on the timing of the new public toilet, yes, the letter there says works will be commencing in March. This toilet it's a prefab type toilet, so it is being currently made in a factory and will be put on site. So the actual works on site will happen quite quickly, and it is still expected to be finished around that 30th of June. So it is still on track to be done within the end date that was on that letter. In relation to the out of order of the XLU, I'll have to take that on notice and find out why it was out of order and how long it was out of order for, and the reason why.
Is there anything else being done?
With the on notice, we don't have an address for Karina. Are you prepared to provide your address or not?
No.
No. Okay, so that won't be
at the
responded
next
to. It'll be
meeting
at the
if
next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, the rest of my question was: are you doing anything else? Anything about the public toilets in Coburg?
We're enacting the council resolution, which was to install the 3 new public toilets on that. It's at the northeast corner of Waterfield and Victoria Mall, and to remove the XLU that's on the northwest corner, and to relocate that to the eastern side of Sydney Road. And we're up to consultation on where that might go, I believe.
Okay, thank you, Director. Thank you, Karina.
Nothing else.
All right.
Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Good. Councillors, that concludes question time, so we'll now move to on-notice items from the previous council meeting. Can I have a motion to receive the on-notice report from the meeting held on the 11th of April 2018. Moved by Councillor Abood, seconded by Councillor Riley. Any discussion on that?
Yes, actually, just very briefly. Let me just grab my So we did have a question. One of the on notice items was a question that had to be asked a couple of times because there was a bit of confusion about the initial answer. But I just wanted to read this so that everybody hears it. As part of the answer to the question regarding off-street parking for shopping centres. In addition, studies have shown that car parking is less valued by shoppers, and shoppers arriving by car contribute less to traders' revenue than might be expected. As such, making better use of parking spaces in shopping districts can have benefits for local businesses, particularly where there is latent demand for other forms of transport. So I just wanted to make sure that was noted.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Abood. Anything from Councillor Riley? Okay. Any other discussion on the on-notice items? Being no further discussion, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Okay, we move on now, councillors, to Mayor and Councillor reports. A report on the activities from councillors in relation to events, activities, meetings or other functions that councillors may have attended. All reports by Mayor and councillors will appear in the minutes of the meeting. We might start from the side if anyone has anything to contribute. We understand everyone's been to a number of things, but Councillor Tapanos, Councillor Riley.
I just have one really quick thing, and I would like to thank the residents of Glenroy for coming out for the Glenroy Festival, and the cheer that went up when Give Glenroy a Go was announced was just absolutely fantastic. So I was really pleased to see that. And I would like to have a special shout out to the Lions Club up there with their art show. I thought that was really brilliant, engaging the students in that, and it was a really, really fantastic atmosphere, and I really hope that the art show continues going forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Farrell?
No, thank you.
Councillor Abood?
Yes, I promised Hepatitis Victoria that I would wave this around at the council meeting. So they've launched their book. It's a children's book called Little Hep B Hero, and it's just an information booklet, pretty accessible story about hepatitis B in an effort to break down some of the stigma that's associated with hepatitis B. They've managed to have it translated into Vietnamese and Chinese, and I encourage everyone to find a copy of this book and read it to a child.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Journey, Councillor Davidson, Councillor Carley.
I just wanted to quickly mention two events that are coming up in May. One on the 19th, which is the Vicky Cleary tribute match at Coburg Lions, and on the 20th, the Faulkner Food Bowl are having their launch as well.
Councillor Bolton?
Just a couple of things. For people who've been following the case of the toxic site in McBride Street, Faulkner, there was a VCAT case last week which went for 4 days, and I'm not sure when we'll hear the outcome of it. It's quite complicated, but it's a very important case, not just for residents in Faulkner in that area, but for residents all over Victoria in dealing with contaminated sites. One of the other things which happened recently was a sort of gathering, a safari at the Leonard Street open space in Faulkner, which is a parcel of land that is owned by Vic Roads that they want to sell off. And there was a gathering there on the weekend, on Sunday, of the Faulkner Residents Association and Friends of Merri Creek, where people sort of went through for a walk through that whole area and looking at the value of preserving that open space. So that's a decision which will come to council as to how council will respond to that, but it's clearly very important, a very important decision, because the land along the creeks is absolutely precious, and once it's gone and built on, it's gone forever. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention, there was something very important that happened in Melbourne today. 120,000 workers and families and so forth came out in the streets to support workers' rights in the streets of Melbourne, from wide range of industries, from aged care nurses to childcare workers to construction workers, about winning back our rights at work.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I'd like to say one quick one, just to continue on about the Give Glenroy a Go campaign. As Councillor Martin mentioned, it was launched at the Glenroy Festival. It's now got some videos on Facebook. We're asking, it was very good at the Glenroy Festival that Member for Wills Peter Khalil came along and recommitted that if in the event of a federal Labor government, that they will be committing $6 million towards the community hub. Of course, Council has purchased the land. Council also and is being a major contributor to it, and we're looking for support from the state government to give Glenroy a go. And so you can go to the website or Facebook and support Council in its endeavours to build a great community hub in Glenroy. Thank you. And I think that concludes the Mayor and Councillor business. Councillors, with your permission, I'd like to move on to the notice of motion that I put forward earlier. I know that's before the other reports, but I do think we've got a number of people in the gallery for that, so I hope that's acceptable to everyone. All right, so that's notice of motion 1418, British Isles Dance Group, and it's on page 171 of your agenda, so I'll give you a moment to move to that, so I realise it. And as you can see, I am the submitter of that notice of motion. I'd like to move an amendment to the notice that I put forward in the agenda. And what I'd like to put forward is that Council provides free weekly use of the Brunswick Town Hall to the British Isles Dance Group for a period of 1 year, effective immediately. And if I have a seconder, I'll speak to it. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Yildiz. Thank you, Councillor Yildiz. Yes, councillors, I know a number of you have visited. This group has been going since 1946 in a number of different venues, and the last number of years at Brunswick Town Hall. You can see the importance of this group to the community members. You only have to go along and see that. I think it's appropriate that we grant 3 years, and originally I was asking for 2 years, but considering we're doing the review of all town hall and community spaces that will be finalised in a number of months, I think 1 year isn't appropriate, and I know some councillors have shared that with me. I assure you I haven't brought it forward because the group needs to go to bed. In fact, they're much more active than I was. I went along at about 10 o'clock at night and was exhausted, and they were dancing away, thoroughly enjoying the evening. So that's not the reason for bringing it forward, but it's so that they can get out and go dancing a bit more later on tonight. Probably. So that's. Would you like to speak to a councillor?
I was just going to say, look, I mean, we've got policies in council, and whilst this one's a little bit, some might argue and say, why are we giving this group special concession? But Beth, Barb and Libby, I spent probably a good 45 minutes there, and you showed me around the engagement of people in their 70s, 80s and 90s. These people, if they weren't there, the question is, what would they be doing? So I think we need to apply this concession to this group in particular, because they are the fabric of our community and have been around for a long time, and even a live band is in existence every week when you meet. And the members come from all over Moreland, from as far up as Glenroy, Brunswick, pretty much I think the entire municipality they cover. So look, I appreciate there are policies that we have to be, we have to be extremely careful how we manage this, but on this occasion, I think this warrants for this group, because if we didn't do this tonight, this group would fold within a couple of weeks.
Thank you, Councillor Yildiz. Councillor Riley.
Thank you. Yeah, I just appreciate the group coming out this evening to hear us discuss this. I want to support this with the proviso that we are actually reviewing, and I've explained this to the British Isles Dance Group, and they were very receptive to the fact that we need to look at what we're doing across our venues and what principles, what values that we're actually espousing. And at the moment, we've got quite a varied program, shall we say, about how we apply our rules and stuff. So I'm sort of a little bit mystified as to why the review wasn't mentioned in the background to this, because I think it's important that the community are aware that we're doing that work. So At some point, I'm hoping that will come to council, but it'll also get an opportunity to go through the lens of groups like yours and other users of our facilities. Your question earlier came to the point of, what are we doing about older persons? Well, I think we're doing a lot of things. I'm really pleased that we are moving to some sort of a working group, because it is something we need to perhaps do some concerted work on, particularly around the varying needs and all of the different pressures that are coming on our city with the huge population growth we've got happening and the pressures around infrastructure, but also around the issues around income and people on the very low end of income. Even though I think it's about 12 or 13 bucks you charge to get through the door, which seems fairly reasonable to me. But for people on very low incomes, that can be quite an impact. So I'm prepared to support this on the proviso we're doing this other important work, and we've already made some exceptions to some other groups. But I would really want us to be able to clear this up so that we've actually got very clear rules about how we're applying these principles in future, that we're fair, we're transparent, and I just think the work that you do, the kind of social support and all the stuff you do, and other groups like you, is priceless, frankly. The health and the social benefits and everything else that goes with it are stuff that we as a city need to support, and I think we will continue to do that beyond this new change. But for the moment, I'm happy to accept this amendment of 1 year, because I think 2 years is probably a bit long, but I look forward to the outcomes of that report. I hope you will take get involved in what we're saying about our venue hire, because I really appreciate your input with that, and we can actually come to some sort of resolution very soon.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Booth.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I'm looking forward to the review actually informing the council about, and also the older persons working group, about what the senior cits are doing in this city, because there's actually no secret that there's a few groups that get free or cheap use of our facilities, and the place is bursting at the seams a lot of the time. There's many events on here that involve dancing as well. So I think this is going to be really an eye-opener for us to find out how you're all staying alive so long. It's fantastic. It's going to be a great piece of work, and I'm looking forward to being involved in it. There's lots of 100-year-olds in this city.
There is a lot of 100-year-olds. Okay. Any other councillors like to speak? Okay. Being no further discussion, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that unanimous. Thank you. It's passed. Well done, ladies. All right. Thank you, it's very kind. All right, we'll move on to councillor reports now. And the first is DED 2918, potential... No, sorry. No, it's not. I'm on the wrong page there. I'm in DED 2418, proactive planning enforcement. And Councillor Martin is on his feet. Are you moving the officer recommendation or alternative?
No, so I would like to move the officer recommendation with a slight additional dot point. And I'll just outline the dot point, and then if I have a seconder, I'll talk to the item. The additional dot point that I'm wanting to move is actually writing to the Minister of Planning to seek that the number of planning enforcement penalty units for offences are actually upped. At the moment, it's quite ridiculous, the fines that are handed out as a result of planning enforcement in the city. And so one of the things that I would like to see is that the penalty units are increased.
Just before you speak any further, do we have a second to that? Councillor Bolton, now you may speak further.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
So in a nutshell, I mean, I've gone through this report, and in reading the report, I was actually, I was quite appalled by what's happening in our city, and the level of developers that have decided that they're not going to meet the planning scheme and the permit conditions that we've issued is really quite appalling. And so what we're doing as part of this is actually upping our enforcement throughout the city. We're employing more planning enforcement officers, which I think is going to be fantastic in actually keeping these developers to account and holding them to account. And as part of that, writing to the Minister, because at the moment, if you're a multi-million-dollar developer and you don't follow your permit, the maximum fine you can get is $1,200, which is absolutely ridiculous. And so we need to write to the Minister to ask him to up that, so at least council, the resources that we're putting into planning enforcement, we're actually able to get some of that money back, because at the moment it's completely, it needs fixing. So I really do hope my fellow councillors support my additional dot point as well as the officer recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton?
Yes, I certainly support this, because I think it's quite outrageous that so many of these developments are not complying with their permits. And it's a range of different issues. Certainly one of the issues where a lot of the developments are not compliant is with the environmental sensitive design components, but a number of other components as well. The planning department is really, it's massively overworked in terms of the number of applications that come in, and Moreland has had a massive increase in the number of applications over the last few years. But in addition to that, just the number of breaches by developers of all sorts of different breaches. So at the moment, council is and part of this report is to try and balance up both responding to complaints by vigilant residents who might be affected by some of these breaches, but also trying to be proactive in following through what developers have done, especially the more controversial developments that have gone to the Urban Planning Committee and or VCAT, and then you couldn't have a lot of confidence of developers that on-sell their land with the permit application attached to it. So I certainly think this report is good in terms of looking at increased resources to this area. Also, the proposing to the government that there be an increase in penalty units, because I think this is really something that we've got to really try and find a way of reining in if we can.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Are there any councillors who want to speak against the motion, first of all? Anyway, I'll take further speakers for. Thank you, Councillor Riley.
Thank you. I just want to rise to speak. I want to endorse the comments of the mover and the seconder, but also to say that just on my ride here, I've been seeing some, not so much the medium and larger developers, but even some of the smaller ones. I'm very concerned about the amount of open space, green cover, trees and so on those spaces, and I'm intending to take photos one day and get off my bike and take a photo and post them for compliance measures, because the report does talk to what's happening around lots of aspects, but one is the fact that we've actually just passed a motion recently around putting bonds on some trees and so on, so that we're actually protecting them in a more effective way, and that's going to have some compliance issues with it. But we've just approved a major policy in the last 12 months about our urban forest strategy and needing to up the number of trees in our city. We've got one of the hottest cities, and we have one of the biggest urban heat island effects in Melbourne, and that policy for me is precious, and we need to be doing something about it. The side of the equation that's dropping off, and we're very conscious of this as councillors, is that many of the private property dwellings are the ones that are actually contributing to the loss of trees. And that's being driven by the number of developments and the types of developments that are happening in people's backyards and the trees that are going with it. So I just think this is really important work that we need to be doing and need to be keeping the pressure up, because we need our gardens to stay and our trees to stay, because we're already pushing against the tide in terms of what needs to happen to get better tree coverage. And at the moment, we're losing more on the private land than we're actually replacing. So we need to find ways to improve it. And if we can do that through these types of measures, all the better, because any development needs to make sure they put in at least some minimum tree coverage and ensure that we get some good outcomes in that sense.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Okay, Councillor Tucker.
Yeah, I'll speak briefly just to echo the comments from the other speakers, but to also note that a lot of what we're trying to do is to create some cultural change within the development community. It is too often that developers seek one thing and apply for a permit for that, but have a complete different objective in what they want to achieve and do something completely different. and it's very, very difficult to actually police all of this right across the city. So we have been doing that when we receive complaints, but now we want to make sure we take a more proactive approach and make sure that we are actually policing compliance with our planning schemes more appropriately. And it is very important because some of the issues that we face in planning are quite serious around design. We've seen a number of large-scale developments that haven't been well designed and had to be redone at the last minute. We've had a huge issue around contamination of soil in our municipality, so we need to make sure that those tests are done, that when there is an environment audit, it needs to be done properly. And quite often, many developers try to skip that. So it is money well spent, and it is something that we need to get on top of, because we are seeing more and more development in our city, and we are needing effectively to change the way developers interact with council and make sure that they know that we're going to be onto them. If they say they're going to do one thing and do something different, there is adequate enforcement, there is adequate compliance, and they will get caught. So I'm really pleased to see this report.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Tapanos. Any further speakers? Councillor Dorney?
I just also concur with all the councillors' comments today. I just would like to touch on some of the environmental sustainable ESD outcomes. Council's really well placed at the moment with the Moreland planning scheme, and a lot of work's been done around addressing ESD in our planning phase of development around Moreland. And we have a lot of control over this. However, council's not well placed to ensure best practice at the design stage is actually moving into construction and operation. And on page 23 of the agenda, there's a pie graph that says out of 17 developments that were assessed on their ESD works and whether they were actually implemented, 17 of those, 10.5% were actually non-compliant, which is quite huge. And, although it is a big investment and we're looking at resourcing with a new staff member, it's obviously highly needed, and I fully endorse a proactive planning enforcement program.
Thank you. Okay, councillors, being no further discussion, I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. We move on to DED 2518, Better Planning and Development Outcomes. Councillor Martin, are you moving? Yes? Second.
So I'm moving an alternative motion, which has been circulated to councillors.
Okay, you're familiar with the alternative? Yeah. Yep. Right. Okay, seconded by Councillor Carly Hannon. Now,
so I'll just wait for it to come up on the board. So I would like to begin by actually thanking Councillor Farnley for deferring this item back in December last year. I had put up an alternative motion back in December, but admittedly it was a little bit undercooked, and so it's good that we're coming back now with the additional sort of lens looking at this going forward. Really, and I'm a little bit disappointed that the resident who asked the question before has left, but what we're really seeking to do here is we're acknowledging that we require better development in the city. We have the planning scheme, but we want to be able to create additional incentives for developers to really give us design excellence. So what we're trying to create is a design excellence scorecard process whereby developers will actually apply for the scorecard, and you'll go through these series of things that we would like to see. It does need more work. What we're going to be doing now is the scorecard will be going back to the Urban Environment Committee for further development, further discussion with residents, with industry, to really understand what are the carrots, what are the sticks, how do we get better planning outcomes. And I'd just like to go through and just highlight for the gallery some of the things that we're including in the scorecard, and that is excellence in architectural design, excellence in building materials used, excellence in the delivery of ESD initiatives and building performance, including the incorporation of greening or PV onto rooftops, so rooftop PV, green roofs, gas-free buildings, looking at the excellence in accessibility and adaptable housing, looking at demonstrated commitment to the delivery of other community benefits, looking at the delivery of public, social and affordable housing within these developments, and also ability to deliver an increased dwelling mix. So really looking at actually trying to have buildings where people want to live in, not just one-bedroom dog boxes. We're actually trying to encourage families that might want to live in an apartment to be actually able to live in there. So as I said, it'll be going back to the Urban Environment Committee, but I do hope my fellow councillors support my slightly amended officer motion.
Councillor Carly Hannon.
Yes, so I'm very pleased both with the officer report and also with the amendments by Councillor Martin. I guess the main thing that I really consider is how important it is to consider our ability to be efficient and to create incentives that will create the kind of diversity that we want to see in our housing market. So one of the main problems is that we do have VCAT and we have our own, the statutory obligations around timeframes and things like that. And we also have the fact that, we come to Urban Planning Committee and we make decisions on the night. And I think all of us have some really great ideas about what we want to see in the kind of developments that are happening in Moreland. But having this scorecard will actually give us a framework that developers will be able to look at and know what it is that we want to see. And I also believe it's going to be the interests of residents and buyers in Moreland too. A few things I want to mention is that in terms of affordable housing, one of the things that actually is going to create some affordable housing is apartments that families can live in. And so one of the things that we're going to see is that we are going to be living on smaller footprints, but with higher ceilings and better lighting, we can actually make these houses somewhere that people really want to live, and we can make our municipality a really part of a city that is cosmopolitan and big and recognises that you can live in suburbia, but you can also live in a city lifestyle with public transport without using your cars and with access to all of your local shops and schools really close to you. And we want this to be affordable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any councillors speaking against the motion? It's a big item, so if anyone wants to speak in favour, you can. Yes, you can.
I'm actually not quite sure what to do with this item, this resolution. I obviously want to see good development and better development than what we've got. But my problem with this motion and the report that is attached to it and the previous motion that was moved last year but was deferred is it's all in the context of either fast track decision making or else in this current report providing certainty to developers by bypassing the Urban Planning Committee. And and also in terms of good design, it doesn't really deal with the issue of height. If it was a scorecard for developers to adhere to without these other provisions, I'd be, I think, quite enthusiastic about it. But I know the motion before us doesn't mention fast track or some sort of certainty of decision making, but the attachment, the notes from the round table, it sort of quite clearly pushes in that direction, which that's noted in the officer's recommendation and also in the alternative resolution. So I'm not exactly sure what I want to do with this resolution because I don't, if it was just the resolution by itself with none of the idea of carrots and sticks, because I actually think developers should be, if there's a good design scorecard, they should be abiding by it. It should be part of the planning scheme and they should be abiding by it, along with our apartment policy. It shouldn't be a question of, well, I would be uncomfortable if this led to some discussion by you can go so many levels above the planning scheme, so many stories above what's in the planning scheme in return for giving this or that, especially as the previous report we discussed and previous resolution we discussed made note of the number of developments that are not complying with what they've agreed to do as part of the Urban Planning Committee or developments that are passed under delegation, the commitments of developers when they've won that permit from council. So I think I'm probably going to abstain on this one.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, Councillor Riley.
Just to sort of address some of the points that Councillor Bolton raised, I think, and the question that was raised earlier by Mr. Perry, I think what we are trying to work out is the fact that the complicated planning scheme we have gets often very mixed results and often underachieves. And certainly I think that's the feeling amongst many of my fellow councillors who are all on the Urban Planning Committee. What this is attempting to do is to try and support those who come with good design outcomes, as has already been mentioned, but also that gets results that are better for our community and better for the people who are living in those places in the future. Because so many of the things we're getting at the moment are just ordinary run-of-the-mill. They're very heavily reliant and actually taken away from our environment because they're very reliant on very old forms of building, and of course, depending on the size and so on, some of the materials are fairly limited. But there are some interesting designs going up in London and so on where they are higher buildings that are being built from timber, which are completely sustainable. But do you see anything like that happening in Australia? I haven't yet. And I think what we are trying to do is to put out the expectation there in the design and the construction industry that we are looking for innovative, interesting outcomes. I think the people who designed this planning scheme back in the 90s wanted to try and get this kind of outcome, but it's become completely driven by so many decisions of VCAT and so many rules and so many kind of precedents. Sometimes precedence takes effect and sometimes it doesn't. It's become so complicated and so complex and so cumbersome. I think, Councillor Bolton, the point that you made about things coming to Urban Planning Committee, they're the ones that actually don't meet the requirements of the planning scheme and they come to us to sign off on them. So they're the ones that are actually put in the too hard basket. What we are trying to encourage is to see more things that actually get ticked off by officers because they do meet all these excellent requirements. I just think that what we are trying to do, and officers, to their credit, have advised us that this is very difficult. It's often failed in other states, and we've tried it in some places in Victoria. It's been very, very difficult to achieve. I just want to acknowledge the work that Councillor Martin has been doing on this and working with officers to try and get around this somehow, that we can get some better outcomes from our city. Look, it's not going to be the silver bullet that I'm looking for, but I think it's worth trying, and I just appreciate the investment we're making and so on to try and get this happening. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Rowley. Okay, being no further discussion, I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? And abstained? Okay. Thank you. I'll declare that carried. DED 2618, Pentridge Master Plan, Review Outcomes. Councillor Bolton is on her feet.
I've got an alternative resolution that, maybe I'll wait till it comes up. Yeah. So that council delays the consideration of the Pentridge Master Plan review until after the outcome of the application for National Heritage listing of Pentridge is known. Secondly, that council conducts 3 months of public consultation on the review, including consultation with key advisory bodies on heritage sites in Victoria, such as the Heritage Council of Victoria and the National Trust, prior to consideration of the review by council. Thirdly, that the review give consideration to options for Pentridge Heritage Precinct-wide advisory body involving not only developers, residents of body corporates, but also the Heritage Council of Victoria, National Trust, Council and Heritage Specialists to oversee and coordinate heritage preservation, a Pentridge Museum and heritage tourist activities on the site in line with the best practice guidelines of the Borough Charter.
Okay, all right, that's moved by Councillor Bolton. Is there a seconder? Sorry, it lapsed for want of a seconder. Do we have another motion? Councillor Abood.
Yes, I'd just like to put the officer recommendation, thanks.
Moving the officer recommendation, Councillor Abood. Does Councillor Abood have a seconder? Councillor Riley. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Bird?
Yes, I'm just a little bit dubious about deferring this again because I don't know how much difference it will make to the outcomes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Bird. Councillor Riley, would you like to speak to it? Yeah, take your time.
Yeah, look, I just wish to support the officer recommendation. Some of the advice we've been receiving about this is that the National Heritage application that has been sort of referred to should be known by around June, so that it should be able to work with the way that the officers have framed the motion. And we've also looked to put in other resources to try and get the minister to progress some of these amendments, but unfortunately it does, as the report states, the landowners need to support that for it to be forthcoming. And then finally, reading the notes here, that with regard to some of the heritage preservation issues, the responsibility of the landowners is enforced by Heritage Victoria. So in some ways this is trying to provide some hope where in fact there may not be hope available in the system. So I think for that reason I'm wanting to support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Do I have a speaker against the motion?
Yes, I do. I must say, I was very disappointed in this review. I sort of feel like, I can't remember who actually moved the motion for this Pentridge Master Plan review, but I'd certainly expected something much better than this. I sort of feel as if, you know, perhaps we've wasted our money on a review like this. It seems that the central question the review comes down to is that the Minister for Planning has advised he won't support a planning scheme amendment that will alter the development yields across the precinct. And that's a comment that seems to be repeated through the review. But so at the moment, the development in Pentridge, at the moment, the current plan with this Pentridge Master Plan, which was developed by the developers, it wasn't developed by council with the advantage of public consultation. It was purely developer-driven. Master Plan, there's been more than one of them, and they've all but one may have had some level of community consultation, but it's possible that all of them have had no consultation. So I would have expected that the review would have been a bit more robust and put a few more things to the test. But it seems to be simply saying that this is basically what it is, you have to just accept it. I mean, there will be something like, 5 18 to 19 storey buildings, as well as a range of other high-rise buildings in the precinct. I think, I don't feel that there has been any real interrogation of the implications of the large number of high-rise buildings that will be so close together and really overshadowing the heritage. I don't feel as if there have been proper consideration of trying to examine a better way of preserving the heritage on the site. And I sort of feel that if council notes the outcomes and writes to the minister sort of accepting the outcome of this critique, I feel like we're endorsing this. I don't feel that even there's been adequate consideration given to traffic issues as well from the large number of high-rise buildings. So I'm going to vote against noting this review.
Thank you, Councillor. Any speakers in favour? Okay, I'm going to put this to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Happy to have that division. Just to do that, councillors who voted in favour, could you raise your hands again? So it's all councillors except okay. And against? Councillor Ball. Good. Thank you. We've got DED 2718 Shopping Strip Renewal Program revisions, and Councillor Abood is on her feet.
Thank you. So I'd like to move the officer recommendation with a couple of very slight changes. Should I wait for a second? Or should I outline them?
No,
and then
if you say what the changes are, but don't talk them.
To include a recommendation 2, endorses the scope, etc., then, sorry, hang on, including the provision of 2 laneway treatments for a further estimated increased cost of $500,000, and then to revise the figure in point 3 to read $2.192 million.
So when you say a slight change, you're talking about a $500,000 slight change. Just to clarify. Okay. No, just to, that's all right. Thank you. Okay, so that's fine. Moved by Councillor Abood, seconded by Councillor Carly Hannon. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Would you like to speak to it?
Yes, I would. So this little diagram here shows us what option A was, the option that was rejected, and option B doesn't include the laneways. I think that there's great value in treating these laneways, and this is the civic area that was being spoken about, which is included on option B. So I think that by including the laneways, we encourage an opportunity for those areas to be activated. At the moment, they're just basically a small, narrow driveway to a car park. I think that, potentially we might see a green wall like we have down here at the Coburg shops since they've been revamped. And I just think that considering it's a substantial amount of money, we may as well just add these 2 little bits in. I totally agree that there's an opportunity to activate this centre, and I commend this work, and I commend Alia Farley for proposing that this Bonwick Shopping Street be bumped up the line so that it can be dealt with sooner, because Faulkner has arrived.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Abood. Councillor Carly Hannon.
I'd also like to rise and commend Councillor Farley on his work for Bonwick Street, and I think it's great to see that it's been brought forward. I guess the main things that I think about is that Bonwick Street is an area that really needs to be activated so that it's pedestrian and cycling friendly. I think the idea of making sure those laneways are activated and have a pedestrian focus will be excellent. It can also encourage cars to be pushed off Bonwick Street onto the car parks and allowing really nice flow to come onto the shops. And of course, we've got things like new bench seats, improved paving, which I've spoken about, the needs to make our suburbs livable to the aged. It's really important that we have nice, smooth streets to prevent falls. And we've also got bicycle hoops and those kind of things to encourage people to come via other modes than cars.
Thank you, Councillor Carly Hannon. Are there any speakers against? Because it's a large report with a large financial commitment, if there's any speakers in favour, happy to take those. Any other speakers? Sorry, Councillor Bolton. Yeah.
I would like just to make a couple of comments. I think it is great that this is being pushed forward. I think there is a good reason for it being pushed forward, apart from other pleasantness of surroundings kind of reasons. The fact that it is angle parking at the Bonwick Street Shopping Centre and there's no pedestrian crossing makes it much more dangerous than a lot of other local shopping strips for elderly or frail pedestrians or people on motor scooters, etc., etc. So I think there is a very good reason for bringing it forward. The resident earlier who spoke, John Englert, I think he raised some good questions about it, about the tree cover, which I'm pretty confident council will look to increase tree canopy cover. I think it would be good to have some discussion with Moreland Bug about location of bicycle hoops or Moreland Bug members who live in the Fawkner area. There's possibly a need to have some discussion about the location of the disability bays, because I know there's a lot of issues with the location of the disability bays at the moment. You know, there's one that's in front of a bin, which makes it awkward for people with their walkers and that kind of thing. But the other issue on the traffic and the parking, for people who haven't visited the shopping centre for 5 years or so, or even just 3 years, there are quite a few new shops in that area. And so there's now a lot more vehicle traffic and parking. So once you would always be able to get a park and the car parks out the back, now you can't on a Saturday morning. And it's because there's some new shop. I mean, in a sense, it's a good thing. New businesses have attracted new customers and attracted people to hang around, etc. But it does mean that now the parking is overflowing in that area. So we will have to do some careful thinking about the bikes and pedestrians and cars in this. It won't be as simple as maybe it might have been a few years ago.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Any other speakers? Being no other speakers, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. DED 2818, contract 690T, provision of surplus, thank you, Councillor, so I'll read the title, provisions of supply and installation of outdoor Christmas and other decorations, and Councillor Davidson is on her feet.
Thank you.
Are you moving the officer recommendation?
Yes, I am.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Yildiz.
Yep.
Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Davidson?
Yeah, just briefly. It's just to move the officer recommendations for the tenderer who will be providing the contract for our Christmas installations. And there's a focus on daytime Christmas decorations as well, so that young people can enjoy the decorations before they go to bed. So previously there was a bit of a discussion about having light shows, but I think it's important that we have that visual display of Christmas decorations, and it's also for selected other festivals that will be used during the year. So it's just to award the contract to the tenderer who was successful for the bid to obtain this.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Councillor,
just to make it clear to the listeners, if there are people watching, that the negotiated lump sum contract amount for 18-19 is 269,702, and the total amount potential contract amount is 1.8 million. So all those who think we're getting rid of Christmas decorations, we're not. We're spending some good money, just to make it clear.
Thank you, Councillor Yildiz. Anyone like to speak against? Any other speakers in favour? Okay.
It is speaking in favour. Just really quickly, I would like to highlight that Council is currently looking into reviewing their procurement policy, and as part of that, I really would encourage anyone who has a deep interest and desire in procurement and improving the quality of things that we procure to get in touch with me, because I am very interested in seeing better tenders and better contracts as a result.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Being no further discussion, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Now move to corporate services, DCS 1918, governance report, May 2018. Moved by Councillor Riley. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Abood. Yep. You're moving the officer recommendation, Councillor
Yes.
Riley? Right. Would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, just briefly, mainly because I am a member of the Moreland Housing Advisory Committee, and I just wanted to put on the public record that people who follow our business will be aware that we approved the Housing Trust in December last year. And it doesn't quite come through the minutes here, but just to let people know that Local Government Victoria, which is a part of the state government, are actually reviewing our proposals, and they are sitting there. And unfortunately, we are now in May, and I just want it to be clear that it concerns me that they've been sitting there for 4 or 5 months and there's been no movement. When we took, I don't know, it's probably 10 years or more of developing this. It's been a very long period. And I just wanted to put that on the record, and that I'm hoping that we can try and get something moving. Some rumours, birds, it's been tweetering in my ear, that potentially the government in an election year might actually be looking at some of the good work of Moreland City Council and some of this progressive work and wanting to actually roll it out across the Victoria. I just hope they do, but I hope they stop holding us up in the process.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Abood, the seconder, would you like to speak? Any other discussion? Okay, being no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. DCS 2018 Financial Management Report for period ending 31st of March 2018. Do I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Abood. A seconder? Councillor Carly Hannon. Would you like to, and just to checking, you're moving and seconding the officer report?
Yes.
The recommendation? Good. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Abood? No. Would the seconder like to speak? Any discussion? Being no discussion, I'm going to put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. We now look at DCS 2118, proposed discontinuance and sale of right-of-way adjoining 13 Strathern Avenue, Coburg. You're moving the officer recommendation, Councillor Abood? And do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Carly Hannon. Would you like to speak to that as a mover?
No, reserve the right.
As a seconder, would you like to speak to it?
I just hope that the residents are happy, and I'll be keen to come and see their place when it's done.
Is there any further discussion? Being no further discussion, I'm going to put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. Move on to city infrastructure. DCI 1118, adoption of parking management policy. You're moving the officer recommendation,
Yes.
Councillor?
I'm happy to second.
Thank you. So moved by Councillor Martin, and you're seconding the officer recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Yildiz. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Martin?
Just briefly, this is looking at our parking management policy across the city. Traffic, parking are hugely important issues to the residents of Moreland, and that's why we've updated this. We're really looking at improving the flow of traffic and the turnover of parking as well in the city. So I really do hope, and I also would like to thank the residents and the ratepayers who have participated in the consultation process. And I really do commend this piece of work and note that it will slide nicely into our Moreland Integrated Transport Strategy when that comes out as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Yildiz, as a seconder, would you like to speak?
All good.
All good. Okay, any other discussion? Being no further discussion, yes, you do. So I'm sorry, yes, you're welcome to speak to it.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention something that's in the report that says that there were several mentions of bike lanes and a request for 24/7 clearways on Sydney Road, and also that it says bike lanes and clearways are the domain of the draft Moreland Integrated Transport Strategy. So a lot of the feedback to these comments is that there's a little bit of a discrepancy about parking in this document and what's known as land use, talking about land use planning. So I just wanted to encourage everybody who made a submission to this to also look out for the draft Moreland Integrated Transport Strategy, because I think that some of what's been mentioned here needs to be mentioned over there as well. And so I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of contributions to the draft of the MITs.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes, you may.
Just of the director, that I'm assuming that those comments have been passed through to the Moreland Integrated Transport Strategy. It just seems logical to me that they've already been moved on, haven't they? Because this is really subject to that. So thank you. Yeah, those comments will be passed.
Thanks for the question. Thanks for the clarification. All right. Any other discussion on this? Being no further discussion, I'm going to put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. DCI 1218, Moody Ponds Creek Chain of Ponds, release for public consultation. Councillor Riley is on his feet. Are you moving the officer recommendation?
Yes, I am.
And you're seconding that, Councillor Davidson?
Yes, please. Thank you.
It's a real pleasure to stand here and approve this, or to move this motion rather, and all of the work that's been undertaken by the City of Moonee Valley and the City of Moreland and all the officers and the community involved. There's been quite a lot of work undertaken. I have to admit that I haven't read the full paper because my links to it weren't working, and I haven't got back to it because I've been preoccupied with other things. I have read the report in this agenda papers, and there's a lot there, the most salient bits there around what we're planning to do and so on. The Moonee Ponds Creek has a checkered history, and it's now largely concreted in parts of our city, and this report is going to try and address some of that and remove some of it. The ponds were famously deep and cold, and they ran, some of the years they overran, and other times they were there in times of, long summers and so on. So we're really hoping to regenerate and use this as an opportunity to do some of the best practice work we can in terms of a very important waterway, a very important lungs of our city, especially when it's competing with one of our biggest roads in the city, which is the tollway next door, and all of the problems that brings and the challenges that brings. So it's a really challenging part of the city. I just want to commend the community that's planning on that work, and the Friends of the Merri Creek and the organisations all up and down there. So we're not dealing with the very lower reaches of the creek, which end up going into our bay, or the further northern reaches. It is just the part, it was about 14 k's along our city boundary. So I really want to commend and thank officers for this. But this is not the end of the story. We've got 2 months of consultation. So that's just to sort of show how important this is. A lot of our things might get 4 weeks if you're lucky, but this is really important. So we would encourage people to take the time to have a look at it. And I'm certainly looking forward to getting into the depths of the document rather than just the report that's come to me tonight. And I hope the link will work for me next time too. I haven't got back to the officer who asked me if it was working, so I apologise if you're listening.
Thank you. Councillor Davidson is the seconder. Would you like to speak to him?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Councillor Riley because that did provide a very good overview of what this report is talking about. Also, just to note that one of the issues that was raised was the length of time that this report and the recommendations in the report will take to achieve, and it was approximately 10 years. But to counteract that, I would never underestimate the strength of the community that is behind this creek and the love and the passion that they have for preserving and protecting this particularly beautiful part of our municipality. And as Mark said, there's parts of it that are concreted, which is a great shame. I like to run my dog down the part where it's not concreted. As soon as I see the concrete, I turn around and do a loop and run back. So I'm looking forward to the community consultation to find out what the community wants and their ideas based on this draft.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Booth?
Yes, I'd also like to commend Councillors Riley and Davidson for their words about this very important part of the city. I think that this is a very exciting piece of work, mostly because it's made me realise that the Merri Creek and Environ strategy is 4 years out of date. I think that as soon as the chain of ponds work is finished, and we can really appreciate the importance of it, we'll be able to move on to the other creeks in the city, including some of the little tiny creeks that feed into the Merri Creek. So I really am looking forward to this being completed, and then we can continue, as has been outlined in Plan Melbourne, to protect, our waterways across the city and create these green corridors of habitat and wildlife.
Yes, you can.
Just to finish up, since the Merri Creek has come into this, and they are our sort of eastern and western borders, the Merri Creek's a fine example of community in action. And really, for me, that's what city life should be about. It's about community participation and community development. And the Merri Creek wouldn't be what it is today. It's been the lead creek waterway in our state, actually, I think. And I don't think I'm overstating anything. And many councillors have been part of that here tonight and before that. And it's over 30, we celebrated 30 years of that last year. And it's really set the benchmark. But I think, as Councillor Booth alluded to, we probably do need to revisit that and look at what's going for the future of that in the next 20, 30 years. But this is a really exciting piece of work. The work that we are doing on the Moonee Ponds is, I think, par excellence, and I'm looking forward to what the community say. We need to get more trees and more breathing and what have you going in our city. It's just another way of doing that. And so I just wanted to sort of thank you for doing that, for contrasting it. We were lucky to have these two creeks on our borders. We really need to nurture them and look after them, and I hope we can all do our bit and get down to the creek and plant something in the near future if you haven't already.
Yep, well done. All right, and as the mover, that closes the debate, so I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. We move on to social development, and we've got DSD 1118, aquatics and leisure service fees and charges, and Councillor Davidson is on her feet. Are you moving an alternative recommendation, Councillor Davidson?
Yes, through the mayor, I'd like to make an alternate recommendation that we remove point C and replace that with to continue the rate of the casual membership that was trialled being $15.
Okay. We'll just get a chance to type that in. Does Councillor Davidson have a seconder for that? Yes. Councillor Carly Hammond? You may speak to it now. Yeah.
I'll just speak briefly to that particular point. So we trialled a few trials since May last year, and one of them was to reduce the rate of the casual membership from, I think it was $23 down to $15. The recommendation in the report is for $19, but I think the success rate that's been documented as being 35% increase in casual attendance at the gym points to how successful this trial was, and it should be continued. I think that Moreland has somewhat of a motto that says we should encourage our residents to be more active more often, and this really points to that. It says they were more active more often, and it was 35% increase in that. And I don't think we can argue against those numbers, and the value that that will bring to our residents outweighs the potential cost that this might cost us, which is quite minimal.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. The second, I'd like to speak to it.
Can I speak to the whole motion? Or
Yeah, the whole thing.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay,
It's a substantive motion now.
Yeah, okay, great. I rise to speak in favour of the amendment as well, but Councillor Davidson's already said everything that I would. I just wanted to mention that with the off-peak membership, while there was only a small number who did trial it, I think it's really great to see our council trialling new things, and even though we're not going to continue with this because it was only a small number, if we do suddenly see that the demand for something like an off-peak membership is there, we'd be really happy to reconsider. So I think it's really good if residents do find ways that we can meet their needs as members of our leisure centres to come forward and speak to us. The other thing is that we are going to be extending Brunswick Bath's midweek closing hours during the summer season, and I think it's just the summer season, and that'll be really great as well. Is it summer or is it winter?
Yeah, it is summer. Yep,
yeah,
you're right.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. No, thank you very much. Any first of all speakers against the motion? Okay. Any other speakers in favour? Okay. Well, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. We move on to DSD 1218, City Oval Gates, response to general business item, GB8. Would you like to move that, Councillor Yildiz?
Yeah, I'm happy to move it. I think councillors are well aware of what's...
I'll just get a seconder first. Do you have a seconder for that? Yep. Councillor Farnley, yeah, speak to it now, please, Councillor.
Look, I think based on our discussions, John, the club is happy with the officer recommendations and also my discussion with Arden. And also Councillor Farnley.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Farnley.
Just some brief insight. This motion is really about providing the opportunity for the club to prepare for match day by providing them a level of comfort and security that their assets that they put out on the oval are protected. but it will still have access to the community through other alternative gates as well. So it strikes a really nice balance between helping the club and ensuring the community get access to City Oval. So I think I commend the work of Councillor Gilders on bringing this to council.
Yep. Any speakers against the motion? Okay, I'll put that. Any other speakers in favour? Yep.
Yeah, just very quickly, I just wanted to stress that initially what was requested was to have the gates closed for 2 nights prior to the game day, and that we've come to the compromise of just 1 night. So that was a bit of a bugbear for me, because I thought that having the main gates closed all weekend is not really sort of acceptable, and I think this is a good compromise, so I'm happy to support it.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. Right, we move on to the other notices of motion. We've already dealt with the first one, but we have notice of motion 1518, zero waste to landfill by 2030, and it's Councillor Martin's motion. Is it as printed or?
So I would like to move an amended notice of motion. I have circulated it to councillors, and it'll appear shortly.
Magically.
The amended notice of motion, for those that are interested, I have changed some of the wording slightly, not referencing employment of an officer. I have changed some of the references in there to incineration to be a little bit more technical, and we'll just wait for those words to come up. I have also included a little bit of feedback from other councillors, just referring to that these items in this will be funded through the budget process, as is always the case. And I've also included a reference to litter hotspots as well.
The councillors have received it. So, any councillor who's comfortable to second the motion?
I am. I'm happy to second.
Okay, happy to second Councillor Yildiz. All right, so while we're waiting for that, councillor, I'm happy for you to speak to the motion.
Happy for me to speak to the
motion.
motion.
Then we can read the motion on
Okay. So, firstly, I do wish to thank my fellow councillors for putting up with me over the last week. I have been frantically working on this. It's something that I am really passionate about, and something that I really want to ensure that Moreland is at the forefront of. And I also want to bring my fellow councillors with me on this journey. Every 4 years in Moreland, we have the opportunity to set a new waste and litter strategy. For the most part, we have some really good programs in each strategy, but it does tend to revert back to business as usual. We have continual growth in waste. We have confusion in the community about recycling, and it is this general out of sight, out of mind mentality. In the last few months, we have seen a complete lack of vision in policy and planning at a state and federal level. That's without a doubt. We are in a crisis at the moment in the waste industry, and it is due to complete inaction from those 2 levels of government. Tonight, the councillors around this table really have the opportunity to support something truly unique. It's a position that is actually a leading position, not in the state, but potentially in the country as well. And it's something that is really strongly supported by the community. Less than a fortnight ago, we had all environment ministers from across the country agree that all packaging should be fully recyclable by the year 2025. We've seen huge community campaigns. We've seen the effects of television programs like War on Waste, and we've heard about it in the community. We've seen the outrage of councils that choose to cancel recycling. It's just something that people really care about, but requires political conviction to actually do something about. We know that half of the waste in your landfill bin is food and garden organics that should be put back into the agricultural system. We know that we can recycle almost everything that goes into our bins, but we just don't have the facilities, we don't have the infrastructure at the moment to support recycling all of this stuff. We don't make it easy for people in the community. And we know that we need to buy more recycled product to give an end use for these industries. Across the state, councils spend a combined $100 million a year cleaning up rubbish and litter. It's a huge amount of money and a massive burden on the ratepayer. I also want to touch on incineration, which I've spoken about in my point G of my notice of motion. Incineration is a quick fix and it's nice and shiny, but with it comes significant emissions, dioxins, toxic fly ash, and a disincentive to produce waste and to preserve our resources. And I would really like to encourage that any councillors here tonight that support incineration, please tell us where in the municipality that you would like to put an incinerator. So I take this moment, I would like to thank my fellow councillors, and I really do encourage you to support this Australian leading motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, Councillor Yildiz, would you like to second to it?
It probably seems to a lot of councillors it's quite comprehensive, but I have actually read it. And I must say, I'm quite proud of what you're putting forward. And you talk about the amount of money the government does take in revenue, and where does it really go? A lot of the stuff that you're putting up here is much needed, and I did speak earlier today. I'm really happy with this motion that you're putting forward. Well done, mate.
Thank you, Councillor Yildiz. All right. Now it's a big motion, so I'm happy to take as many speakers speaking in favour.
Yes. Imagine if I said no. First of all, I'd like you to scratch thanks for putting up with me, because you're an asset to the council and to the city, Dale, because of your knowledge on this stuff. And I'm really glad that you're leading the way, because imagine if I had to do it. But what has happened is, like Councillor Yildiz, I also read this work, and then I started to do a little bit of research. And I think that what has happened with the fact that we've pretty much destroyed our manufacturing industries and got all of our plastic making outsourced, and then tried to send it back to the manufacturers of that plastic and got away with it for all this time until they said, actually, we don't want your rubbish anymore. It's a really good opportunity for us to learn to break our addiction to plastic. Every time I go anywhere, I'm either handed a piece of paper or a plastic cup or some catering wrapped in mountains and mountains of Glad wrap, and there's just, my whole life is full of single-use plastic items. And I think that what we really need to do is we need to embrace this challenge, and we need to find ways to, forget about waste to energy, because even the greenwash countries like Denmark are starting to acknowledge that in fact what they're creating is 1 tonne of ash to every 3 tonnes of waste, and the ash is full of furans and dioxins. So everything that we've heard about from Councillor Bolton, which we've seen playing out at VCAT with regards to the contaminated site, that site and those toxins were furans and dioxins, which we don't have a facility to test for that stuff in Australia anywhere. So considering the millions of dollars it would cost to build the not in my backyard incinerators, maybe that money partnered with the money that we're going to need to build the testing facilities for the chemicals that are going to be coming out of this burnt waste may mean that we really do need to stop using single-use plastic items and start taking this seriously. I'm really proud to be part of a council that I think can accept that we have a mental capacity to do this, and the ambition and the knowledge within the room that can, lead us with this stuff. And so I have absolutely no qualms whatsoever supporting every element of this ambitious norm. That makes me proud to be part of this council.
John, can I just make one more comment?
Just to move for other speakers in a minute. Yeah, would you like to speak?
I've got a prop. And I didn't bring this in deliberately for it, but I carry this bag with me everywhere I go. It's inside my other bag. I am a refuse, reduce, reuse tragic. This bag is from 1998, from the Health Indifference Conference, which was the second National Lesbian, Gay and Transgender Bisexual Health Conference held here in Melbourne. It's almost at its end. And I just want to give a plug to Boomerang Bags while you're here. So if you want to make a bag or have your own, there's a wonderful group that are doing this sort of stuff. This, to me, is an example of just what we need to be doing. I've been doing it for too long, but I'm not saying my household's perfect. I've actually got people I live with who kind of disappoint me every day, but but we try to reduce our footprint, or at least some of us continue to try and do that. But this initiative is actually underscoring that. But without the kind of leadership from governments and people like Dale, we're not going to get it. I do think we are at the brink of actually a huge transformation in how we actually consume and recycle and reuse some of our waste. I think the commingling is, I'm hoping it's going to come to an end one day soon because it's part of the problem. It's going to be a very expensive solution, but we're going to need to face up to it eventually. As a teacher, this bugs me every day, and I can show, I could bring photos in, and I'm not going to mention my school at the moment because it's a bit embarrassing, but it just goes to show how busy life is. Like the kids at school actually are meant to bring nude food lunches. And if you're wondering what nude food is, it's having a lunch in a lunchbox without any packaging or anything like that. And it's not new, it's been going around for years. But I can tell you, I spend every day crossing the yard picking up the crap that they bring to school because a lot of their parents buy crap and they get it from the supermarkets and it ends up on our playgrounds. It ends up in your streets. It ends up in your, our waterways, down our creeks we've just been celebrating tonight, and not to mention our wonderful bay. Anyway, look, I just want to stop there because I could go on, but I think we really do need to lift our game in this area because we've got a lot of work to do, and we need to really do something about it. And I just want to commend the work that's gone into this, and thank Dale for showing the leadership.
Okay, Councillor Ollie. I will go back to Councillor Hildiz.
While we're on the topic, I remember living in Merri-bek. We used to get 10 cents for a can or a bottle back then. This is back in the late 70s, and it's disappointing that the container deposit legislation, I'm hoping, was supposed to come in June this year, and I hope it does. But I just shared a video before where Sweden's actually burning all their waste, creating alternative fuel, and 99.5% of it is actually non-toxic. And I thought I'd share with some of the councillors, this is actually clothing that is broken down and then used as alternate fuel. And this is in Malaysia. Malaysians have got a factory over there, which I saw 2 weeks ago. Incredible how clothing that we don't want, that can't be used for wiper, gets converted to little pellets that's used instead of coal. And they're doing it in Malaysia, the only factory in the world, but we're in Australia and it's only worth $2 million for each machine. It's disappointing, and I've been working with a sustainability company since November last year, and I'll tell you what, my eyes have opened, but visited a tip recently and you see truck after truck, tip trucks are just banked for at least 1 kilometre, and when you see the garbage that goes into landfill, yeah, some of it does get converted to methane gas, but I was just having a chat with Jess before and it's sad. I reckon every child needs to go in, and especially young kids at primary school level, need to see what we're doing to our planet. And the company I work for go out and provide free training programs to primary school kids about sustainability, and it's just, we're destroying the planet. So that's why I'm rapt that Dale's taken a leadership role that our senior people haven't taken in various levels of government. And we all need to embrace this and engage in this because it's important for the survival of our future and future generations.
Thank you, Councillor Hildiz. Councillor Bolton.
Yes, I actually think it's great that Councillor Martin has brought this, has followed the whole issue about recycling and waste and has devoted a lot of research effort to this issue. This motion is focused on sort of practical things that council can do. So it's steered clear, really, of sort of demands on state and federal government. But I think there is more we need to do in terms of some of our positions, in terms of calls on the state government. But I think in particular, it is important that Councillor Martin has included opposition to burning waste to create energy. I think it is really important that Moreland takes a strong stance on that issue, which in a sense that is a call on the state government. because the state government has indicated they support or want a trial doing exactly that, and that is really about as dirty as burning coal. So it's it's not a solution. I think there are a lot of practical measures in here. I think I'd flip it around a little bit the other way. I don't think we're addicted to plastic. I think it's the manufacturers and retailers who are addicted to plastic. I don't think it's ordinary consumers generally, because I think basically people get what is served. You walk into the shop and you get a choice of product X with packaging and product Y with packaging. You don't really get that much of a choice. So I think that's the other thing, is actually having some more focus. I mean, this is obviously not just a council issue, but more focus on the manufacturers and producers of the rubbish, because it's not just the poor end person. It's actually, even just a shift from eating in a cafe on proper plates to a totally throwaway economy, even if you actually eat in. All of those issues, which is a huge waste of resources. Even if you recycle it, it's a huge waste of resources. And probably, I think this is more something for when the waste and litter strategy comes up, but I also feel like we need to do put some pressure on real estate agents to educate tenants, because the rules are different from different municipalities, different states around recycling, and so that's an important element, I think, around recycling.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dorney.
Thank you. I would also just really like to commend Councillor Martin on his leadership, commitment and innovation in this space, and that's why we have leaders, because change the dialogue, change the story and change the outcome. I think what's happening right now around incineration and the talk of that as a solution is very dangerous. I've also done some research in this area, and look, I'm not opposed to turning waste into energy. I think that's a great idea, and that's something we need to be doing. It's the incineration debate that's of serious concern, and to actually stand up here tonight as one of the first councillors actually standing up and making a stance to seeking to actually address this issue, I feel very proud. I'd just like to say that incineration, there hasn't been anything that is proving to me that this is worthwhile in any sense, financially, economically, environmentally, and to human health. There is so many reasons why this isn't a good idea, and how it's even getting wind is, it just needs to be nipped in the bud, and I'm proud to be standing here and one of those voices doing that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tappanos.
Thank you. It is great to be able to have a discussion about these matters here tonight, but I'm a little bit disappointed, I must say, because we do have a waste and litter strategy, and I do think that a lot of the key concepts that are really envisaged in this motion need to be worked through that policy into the future. And now, Councillor Martin said that it is potentially not just national leading, but world leading, some of the things that are being proposed. And I just feel that when we really do look at it, a lot of these issues around waste reduction, incineration of waste in particular, are going to be big debates into the future that really do need to occur after substantial feasibility reports, after substantial information is provided to the council. Real strategic policy change is created by having that work done before decisions are made. And they're not done on a 2-page notice of motion. We have a litter strategy, and I feel it would be more appropriate to refer some of these ideas and these concepts, which have a lot of merit, to the Metropolitan Waste Forum, which we are a member, to seek their position and their opinion, and to refer them and to bring forward the review of our waste and litter strategy, so we can actually get officers to cost some of these measures. So we can get officers to really dig into the detail of this advocacy position around not supporting incineration of waste. I mean, we have around the table tonight a little bit of product from Malaysia, which I believe is incineration of waste, and we've had one councillor talk to us about how toxic it is and another councillor talk to us about how it's not toxic. I mean, what is the information? Where is the scientific backup? Where are the reports? Where's the feasibility study? All of this stuff is not in a 2-page notice of motion. It won't be. It would be a lot of work, strategic work, that will be done by the state government into the future. And I feel at that point in time, when we have that information, when we have those reports, we as a council are able to more adequately and more meaningfully participate in what would be a statewide debate around this policy. I think going in first might sound great. We want to be leaders in it. But really, how are we going in when we don't know what is even being proposed? So I do think more work needs to be done. I commend the intent, but I just don't think this is the way to implement progressive policy change by jumping the gun and actually not doing the homework. I think we don't look professional in many ways. But as I said, a lot of the stuff that is being discussed has actual substantial value.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other councillors that wish to speak? Yes, Councillor Farley.
Olivia over here.
And Olivia, okay.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh, Mayor Kavanagh, for the opportunity to speak. Just an interesting observation, if I may. Have you heard of that sort of saying, rates, roads and rubbish? Before, I call council business. Interestingly, by 2030, if we get rid of waste, this council could just be rates and roads. Just an interesting observation.
Recycling.
Rates, roads, recycling, yeah.
Anyway, look, seriously though, we have a waste strategy coming up in a couple of months. I think it's really important that we wait for that work to be completed. At the end of the day, within this motion, there are no costing models looking at what it's going to cost ratepayers if we adopt this approach. I'm not saying that I'm actually against this approach at all. I'm quite open to the idea of adopting a zero waste policy by 2030 or 2025, what it may be, but I really want to hear from the experts before I commit to whatever approach we take. So whether that is no incineration or incineration, whether it's more recycling or 5Rs or where we send our waste or no waste at all, I think it's really important that we wait for the experts to join with our internal waste officers to actually nut out what we want to do over the next, I think it's 4 years. So I would be more comfortable waiting a couple of months, waiting for that piece of work to be completed before we move ahead. Now, I did speak with Councillor Martin prior regarding this. I didn't want to vote against. I actually preferred deferring, but I understand his wishes are that we just vote either way, so I'll respect his wishes. So at this stage I'll vote against, but I just want to be clear that it's not necessarily that I'm against the philosophy of zero waste. It's more that I think there's a process here. We wait for the strategy to be completed, wait for the experts to come to the table with our council officers that have extensive years of experience in waste. Once that piece of work is completed, in a few months' time, we may adopt, in actual fact, a very similar policy to this or something fairly similar. So I will be voting against tonight. But thank you, Councillor Martin, for your advocacy on this.
Thank you, Councillor Farnley. Councillor Carly Hannon.
Okay. So I'd like to begin by commending Councillor Martin on his work, and I do realise that you have a lot of knowledge in this area. It's enlightening for our council, and it definitely does push me to learn more. I know more about incineration today than I did yesterday. I'd also like to thank Councillor Dorney for some of the research she's provided with me, but also just even your words before about saying it doesn't have to be incineration, there's other ways that we can do it. You know, I guess where my concern has been is that from what I've heard, incineration would be better than landfill. And I'm going, sometimes I know that we get into difficult situations where it's about choosing between, you know, something that's really not good and something that's not good. And so I don't want to lock myself into a position where, you know, it's the perfect ideal world, but I don't live in a perfect ideal world. Having said that, I'm really keen to look into more of this and to know what other avenues there will be. I'm going to support this motion except for A and G, and the reason being that with the 2030 zero waste landfill framework, I think that we can probably look to adopting that, but some of the comments from the officers, particularly around the controls and levers that we have and knowing what kind of finances it's going to take. I just have to consider all of the different things that I want to see our council do, and therefore I don't want to put, forward something without knowing what's actually going to be involved. And I do hope that even just having this motion, whether it gets up in its entirety tonight or not, the officers are going to take what you've said and what we've spoken about in this chamber, and hopefully we're going to find out more information about, what we can achieve. And that's the same with the incineration. I'm not going to support a complete stance and ban on it tonight, but I would like to continue to hear more, and, we'll take a stance in the future if it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carly Hannon. I'm going to go to the mover to close the debate, and judging by what we've heard from Councillor Carly Hannon, wanting to vote in favour of some parts and against, when it is coming to the vote after that, we're going to do it step by step. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Just touching on a couple of items in there. I note that we have a Zuki strategy at the moment, which says we're going to be net zero emissions by 2040, and I note that strategy isn't costed, and we vote on the items each year, and we decide whether or not we support those items. So I think councillors that might be a little bit concerned about the funding process, that is addressed, and we will approach that as we move forward towards 2030 over the next 12 years. Just touching on a couple of points that Councillor Tapanos raised in regards to incineration. I'm not sure if I have made the wording completely clear, and I did change the wording to actually reference exactly what we're talking about, and it is the incineration of municipal solid waste, hazardous medical, or any other mixed waste stream. So this does not exclude waste to energy. This excludes that specific type of incineration. So any of the waste to energy plants that might be operating on a landfill at the moment that are using the methane off that, any of the waste treatment facilities for sewerage and things like that, that's still, of course, allowed. And there's also farming opportunities where they use digesters and those sort of things. So this is not excluding everything in that space, but it is specifically targeting municipal solid waste and mixed waste streams. So this is just stopping municipal solid waste and our recycling from being burnt as a quick fix to a massive recycling crisis, which has had vast underinvestment from state and federal governments, and a state government that has $1 billion, $500 million of funds sitting in an account which could be spent to solve this waste crisis. So I really want to emphasise those points. I also want to talk about point A, in that establishing this zero waste framework, it is vitally important that is embedded as part of the waste and litter strategy. There's not really a point in developing a waste and litter strategy and then a couple of weeks later saying, oh yeah, we're going to target 2030 zero waste. The waste and litter strategy would have already been done and locked down for the next 4 years. So we do lose 4 years if we don't include this now. So I really encourage councillors to not wait on this one. This piece of work really needs to inform and feed into the waste and litter strategy moving forward. So I do really implore my fellow councillors to really have the conviction and the courage to vote on this, because this is a truly Australian leading notice of motion, and I really do hope that you all support it. Thank you.
Councillor. All right. Okay. We're going to go through the items one by one. So we're going to begin putting to the vote number 1A, right, which is establish a 2030 zero waste to landfill framework. All the councillors clear on what we're voting on? 1A. All those in favour? Against? Do we have to do this for all?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important.
So we've been called for a division. Okay. Sorry about that. So all those in favour for 1A, could you vote again, please? And against? Okay, so
you live with it.
Hang on. Settle. No, against was Tapanos and the farmer. Yeah. Yes. I'm sorry, Councillor Carly Hannon, on that one, did you vote in favour?
Yeah, in favour.
In favour, yes. Okay. Right, 1B, right. Seek to embed and give weight to 5 R's, refuse, reduce, reuse, repurpose, recycle as core values in our future contracts and procurement policy. All those in favour? Against? Same as before. You want a division each time? Same as before. Okay. 1C, seek to complete the rollout of bin lid colour standardisation, plastic waste implementation, etc. I think we've got to be. All those in favour? Against? Same as before. Yeah. Okay. D, seek to run trials of community reverse vending machines in activity centres. That's if no state or national container deposit legislation is planned or implemented by the end of the 2018 calendar year. All those in favour? Against? Okay. E, identify cigarette litter and waste water dumping hotspots by commercial in key commercial and environmentally sensitive corridors. In response, seek to stamp drains and install voting bins. All those in favour? Against? Same as before. F, investigate through the Economic Development Division ways to support and engage with reuse and recycling businesses and the possibility of facilitating 2 repair cafes within the municipality. All those in favour? Against? The same as above. G, oppose the creation of fuels and or incineration by, and I don't know how to pronounce that name. Pyrolysation of municipal solid waste, hazardous, medical and any other mixed waste stream. Okay, all those in favour? Against? I'm sorry, Councillor, did you in favour?
Abstain.
Abstain. So we had 8 in favour, 2 against, and Councillor Carly Hannon abstaining. Okay. Thank you. H, be ready for adoption by Council at or before the end of the 2018 calendar year. All those in favour? Against? As above, without the abstaining. Yep. 2, notes that waste and litter programs are funded through the budget process and are included for adoption as part of the waste and litter strategy. All those in favour? Against? Councillor Carly Hannon, were you in favour of that one? Yeah. So only 1 against there, Councillor Department. Okay. We move to 3. 3A, receive report in, I think we can do this on block, I think this one. Anyone, that's okay. We're going to do 3A, B and C all together. Okay. All those in favour? Against? As above. Okay. And 4, writing to the State Minister of Energy, Environment and Climate Change, the Federal Minister for Environment and Energy and local members of Parliament to lobby for funding and establishment of industrial organics and recycling facilities that address proximity and contamination issues, grow employment, encourage mandatory product stewardship and encourage closed-loop systems.
Can I just ask a question?
You can of that one.
Is that local members of state and federal parliament or one or the other?
That's both.
Okay, we might put that in then.
Just because I've had to duplicate names for letters in the past.
Okay, state and federal members, like the state and federal. Okay, thank you very much. Good clarification. I think we're clear on what that is. All those in favour? Against? The only one against, Councillor Fartley. All right, thank you, councillors. I know that took a fair bit, but I think it's a very big motion and so it's worth going through. Okay, we move on to our next notice of motion. Notice of motion 1618, review of pedestrian strategy. Councillor Bolton.
Okay, this motion, the first part is noting that the pedestrian strategy is due for review in 2019-2020 after the Moreland Integrated Transport Strategy is completed. But the second part is calling for an interim report at the August 2018 council meeting that looks at new developments in the activity centres where there are commercial premises on the ground floor which are likely to attract pedestrians to cross busy roads where there are no pedestrian crossings. Such premises would include supermarkets and other like businesses. And I just realised that I left a sentence out, the action component. The extra sentence, which I only just emailed around, is that the report would include recommendations on practical measures to improve pedestrian safety when necessary.
Okay. All right, so that's Councillor Bolton's motion. Do we have a seconder?
Yes.
Yeah. Councillor Farley, seconding. Would you like to speak to a Councillor Bolton?
Yes, just briefly. The real reason why I've moved this motion is because of the death as a result of a car hitting a woman crossing busy Nicholson Street in Coburg on the night of the council elections last year, or 2016, I mean, and she was running across the road to go to the IGA. And what the discussion with those residents really made me think about is that since our pedestrian strategy was developed around 10 years ago, development has really changed in the city. There are some new pedestrian routes in the city. Our pedestrian strategy recognises that because being a pedestrian is the slowest mode of transport, people will take the shortest route, often whether it's safe or not. And I think there are now some new pedestrian routes in Moreland because we have an approach of trying to encourage developments or large developments where there are businesses in the ground floor. Now, some of those businesses probably don't necessarily attract lots of pedestrian traffic, but things like IGAs do or supermarkets do, and potentially some other businesses. So I think we should look at this specific element. I've spoken with the council officers and they think it is doable to do this because it's just limited in scope to something very specific which could assist with pedestrian safety in Moreland.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Would you like to speak to Councillor Farley?
Yeah, very briefly. Thanks, Councillor Bolton, for moving the motion, and I understand concerns also are primarily around that unfortunate site where pedestrians are crossing IGA on Nicholson Street. And actually, would you believe it, on the way here, I had a resident dart across me right in front of that IGA crossing. So it is quite a section that needs a look at. I can assure residents are sort of engaged at home as well. There's a great community group around this that Councillor Riley and I, as the Transport and Infrastructure Portfolio Councillors, are putting this high on the agenda with the Director, and it was discussed at our last briefing. We are certainly pushing for a resolution here. A lot of it does depend on Vic Roads, but we are working closely with them. We've had some good wins with them recently, and hopefully this will be one that comes soon. As soon as we have some information to share, I'm sure we will. But thank you, and I'm happy to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Farley. Any other speakers on this? Being no further speakers, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. We move on to Notice of Motion 1718, Trans-Pacific Partnership Submission. Councillor Bolton.
So this is a motion around the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, which is relevant to local councils because it's still the new version. The revived version still allows global corporations to sue governments over health, environment and public interest laws, the investor-state dispute settlement.
Just before you go on, Councillor, we've got the motion before us. I'll just see if we have a seconder.
Okay.
Do we have a seconder for the motion? I'm sorry, Councillor Bolton, it lapses for want of a seconder. All right, we've got the notice of motion 1818, proposal to conduct two transport fora and with the Metropolitan Transport Forum ahead of the Victorian state election. Councillor Riley, you're the mover.
Thank
So
you.
I think we know the motion before us, so I'll just check if we've got a seconder first. Do we have a seconder? Councillor? Yep. No, yeah.
Just briefly,
Councillor
I think, sorry.
You're right, yeah.
Just briefly to say that the Metropolitan Transport Forum, as I mentioned at question time, is something that the City of Moreland supported for many years, and many metropolitan councils are part of that forum. One of the aims of that is to try and advance transport issues which affect local councils. Many of the levers for this are with the state government and federally, particularly with the funding streams that the federal government provides. So the forum is mainly trying to advocate across cities, our metropolitan cities here in the broader Melbourne and Victoria, to get better outcomes. And as I said earlier, there's a commitment to run a forum in Brunswick, which is fairly well known as going to be a contested seat, highly contested seat, and may actually potentially change hands. I don't want to make any predictions about that, but that's some of the arguments that have been put. The Pascoe Vale seat is quite different. It's not less likely to change hands in any time soon. However, the issues there are just as acute, particularly around transport needs, and the east-west issues around the connectivity across those links between railway lines and tram lines, and indeed other bus routes, are just as important. And I think it's important for us to allow our communities to debate these things in the lead up to the state election, and it'd be pity for us not to be able to use this as an opportunity to support it. The forum and the worker that's behind this is fairly convinced. There's been some good news in the budget this week about some bike funding on the missing link up the upfield shared path and on Cumberland Road. We've got potential for the LXRA to remove the Glenroy level crossing there, but how that's kind of being pushed out, and we're not too sure how that's going to be. So I think there's some really interesting issues in Pascoe Vale that should be debated, and I think, in my view anyway, in the state election context. And of course, as I said, I just want to conclude by saying that we're not covering off on Broadmeadows, as I mentioned, but I'm happy to work on apropos of this motion. I just think it's good democracy that we have this kind of action, and the investment is very small for us, but we could potentially get two fairly effective forums that are sponsored and run by the forum, our Metropolitan Transport Forum, to run these two fora. Sorry, I've just lost my train of thought now. But sorry, just finally in concluding to say that really this is really important, because we're going to run the Bus Matters campaign as part of that strategy ahead of the state election, and the impact that could have. I think it's really important that we get that happening in the north of the city as well as the south, so that we get a really good Bus Matters campaign closer to the election day. Thanks.
Thank you. And the seconder was Councillor Martin. Would you like to speak to it?
Okay, yeah.
Right. Any other speakers to it?
Can I have a slight amendment?
Yeah.
I'd like to propose, after you mention one in Brunswick and one in Pascoe Vale, state electorates, and I'd like to insert the words "and one in the Faulkner part of the Broadmeadows electorate."
Is that acceptable to the mover and the seconder? No. Okay, so we can. Okay, so that we'll need a seconder for that to make to include that. Yeah. Is there a seconder for that for Councillor Bolton's amendment there? No, it lapses for want of a seconder, so therefore we've got the substantive motion. Any other contribution to the substantive motion? Being none, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. We'd move to general business items for members of the gallery and for those live streaming. An item of general business relates to a business that calls for a presentation of a report to a future council meeting. General business items do not appear in the council agenda, but these items will be minuted. I'll now ask each councillor in turn to speak to their general business items and if they have a mover and seconder. The first general business item is from myself. It's titled Former Pigeon Club Building at Martin Reserve. Martin Reserve, not Mutton Reserve. We've got two reserves about a kilometre from each other, one called Martin and one called Mutton, which always causes a bit of confusion. Councillor's been, I'll read the motion and then I'll talk to it about a seconder. That a report be presented to the June 2018 Council meeting outlining Council officers' view on the relocating of Glenroy Lions Boxing Club to a former Pigeon Club building at Martin Reserve in Hadfield. And if I have a seconder, I'll speak to it.
Yep.
Yeah, seconded by Councillor Yildiz. Better stand if I'm speaking to it. Council's been approached by the Glenroy Lions of the Lions Club of Glenroy. They've been hosting a boxing competition and they no longer have that venue to use. They've explored Martin Reserve and would like to use it. This motion will not give them use of that. It will simply call for a report to see the officers' view on them being granted usage of that particular building.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So the Pigeon Club no longer uses it?
No, they don't, and they've that took a while. That's a good question. It took a number of months to make contact, and the former president have accepted that they haven't used the building for a number of years now, and they have.
For a number of years.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
and Australia Post have got their act together as well. That's the real reason.
All
I have a
right. Okay.
question.
Thank you, Councillor Yost. Yes.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, is the report really required for this? I mean, what are the council's processes in regards to? I mean, reports cost money and time for officers, and surely we have policies that enable requests like this to be dealt with a decision being made under delegation by council officers. And if he breaches those policies, of course, it could come to council. But I don't understand why reports required and why we're debating it in the chamber.
Well, like a number of matters, this is something that we could potentially respond to without it requiring a report. Sometimes councillors raise it for a number of reasons. It is something we could potentially assess without a report.
And I'm also happy to comment. The reason I've called for a report is because it has gone on for a number of months, and not for the fault of the officers, because of the unused facility. It took a long time to track down the Pigeon Club, etc. And so I'm trying to expedite it because as weeks are going by without the Glenroy Lions having a venue, a possible venue for the boxing club, they're afraid that what's been a really active group of young people in Glenroy will start to dissipate, and they're concerned that the club might start to falter a little bit if they don't get things soon. All right, fair questions. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. All right, the next general business item is from Councillor Bolton. The title is Fossil Fuel Divestment. And could you read the motion, Councillor?
So the council receives a progress report on the fossil fuel divestment strategy and the next steps by the July council meeting. This report should include information on the reasoning for the granting of the contract for council's banking services to the Westpac Bank, one of the major banks that invests in fossil fuel projects.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that motion?
Can I ask a question?
Do you need to? I might get a seconder first, if that's right. Do we have a seconder for the motion? Yep, Councillor Riley. Now, just before you speak, Councillor, you have a question?
Well, it's in line with the question that Councillor Tapanos just asked. Do we need to have a report for this, or can it just come to a briefing like we have a briefing every month?
Similar answer. This can come to a briefing. In fact, it's an option that's been put to the councillor as well.
My reason for moving this motion is that I was very heavily involved in pushing the fossil fuel divestment strategy in council with Councillor Blinker Thompson in the last council. And my understanding when we finally passed the strategy after 12 months or 18 months of work in 2015 was that it would come back to council for a vote before the contract was signed, or the new contract was signed. And so when one of the residents came to a council meeting earlier this year and asked a question about council investment, I then talked with the Director of Corporate Services and discovered that the report, that the tender had already been granted, and we heard from the CEO tonight that it was under delegation. But my impression, I might have been wrong if I reread the report, my impression was that this would come back to council for a vote so that we can have a bit of a say over over whether or not the fossil fuel divestment strategy is tracking well. Are some of the banks that previously that are considered fossil fuel free, do they now offer the range of services that council requires? At the time when we passed that strategy, it was reported that they didn't, and none of them put in a tender. But yeah, I think we do need, the strategy is a waste of time as having passed unless we're really monitoring it.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Does the seconder want to speak? No. Any other discussion?
Yeah.
Yes.
I am happy to support Councillor Bolton's motion because Councillor Thompson did brief me on the work that she'd been involved with you, and especially about divesting from superannuation. Divesting, you know what I mean anyway. So I do appreciate the nature of this work. I have another question about whether this will have to come to a confidential confidential part of the council meeting.
Yeah, through the Mayor, the answer is yes. Some parts of the tender will be, we won't be able to publish because for probity reasons we won't be able to put that commercial in confidence information out there. It would be in a confidential part of the report.
So that was just for clarification, but I will be supporting this notice of, it's a general business item. General business item, but with full knowledge of, incineration, the lesser of two evils. I think we're dealing with, banks are not necessarily going to do the things the way we want them to, but in this situation we're forced to use them so that we can pay our staff.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Being no discussion, I'll put further discussion. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. The final general business item is one from myself. It's titled Councillor Support Policies, and the motion reads that a report be prepared for the July 2018 council meeting outlining the steps and the required time frame to review all policies relating to councillors. And if I have a seconder, I'll speak to it. Councillor Abu. This has come up because, in fact, I know there is some work being done by officers at the moment, but hoping this might expedite it. At the moment, we have a whole range of council policies, I think 6 in different spots, looking at putting them all into one and giving this council a chance to have a review of what those council policies say. So, once again, it's only calling for a report. It's not making any other decision than that, and asking for 2 months to have that report ready. Do you want to speak to it as a seconder?
I am supporting this general business item because recently I was invited to the Young Achiever Awards, and 2 nominees from the City of Moreland were nominated for the Young Achiever Awards, and both of them were young and both of them were women, which I have the portfolios, or we don't call them portfolios, but I'm councillor responsible for youth and women, which I share with 2 other councillors, 1 each, thank you. But the ticket was going to cost me $120, and it's on a Friday night. So Friday nights are hard for me to pull off because I'm the active parent on Friday nights. So I would have had to find a babysitter, and there's already babysitters engaged for the rest of the week because there's 4 meetings a week usually. Plus I had to pay $120. And I think it was a real situation for me. I didn't feel like I could justify the time or the money, but I was also really conflicted about how important I felt it was for a councillor who's responsible for young women in both categories to be present if one of those 2 young women win the award. So I just was advised to acknowledge it later on, but I'm interested to know what this looks like.
I actually got the same invite for that about 2 months ago, and I paid my for my own ticket. I am actually going. Then I found out later on that we actually have 2 nominees there. Had no idea, but I was going anyway, so I paid for it about 2 months ago. I know the policy says we can't have council pay for it. There's another one now with Susan Alberti, and I just emailed Kim today and said I'm happy to pay for that.
Yeah.
So I'm going as
Okay.
to that. So I can do whatever needs to be done on behalf of the council.
Your wife
All
will
right.
babysit my kids.
All right,
I'm going to
now,
pay for your ticket and baby.
so we're in formal meeting at the moment, so, okay, any other discussion? Okay, being no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Councillors, that concludes the general business items. As there's no general and there's no urgent business, I'll now call that we move into the confidential business of the agenda. Could I have a motion to close the council meeting? Moved by Councillor Davidson, seconded by Councillor Raboud. Any discussion on that? I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried, and meeting closed at 9:44 p.m. Councillors, I'd normally want to go straight to confidential items, but I wouldn't want to just go to the toilet, so we have a very short break, about very short minutes. Is that possible? Thank you.
In other words, don't leave the chamber. Do you want to let the deputy mayor take the chair while you're gone?
Oh, you could do that if you want.